We've got a rapt audience, very quiet out there tonight. We've got a full schedule, so I'm going to call this meeting to order. Today we acknowledge that this event is taking place on the traditional territory of the Indigenous peoples of Turtle Island. We are thankful to share in the special spirit of this place, rich in their energy of Mother Earth, our ancestors, and the love of all creation. I will now look to the Deputy Mayor for the adoption of the agenda, and I can advise that we will be moving item 12.2.1, which is the staff report on the hockey tenancy agreement. We'll be moving that forward to right after the consent agenda, so that those in the audience that came for that item will get that dealt with. And having said that, I will now pass it to the Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Thompson. Moved by me, seconded by Councillor Comey. Be it resolved that the content of the council agenda and addendum for March the 11th, 2019 be adopted as presented.
So I will call the vote. All in favor? That is passed unanimously. Thank you. Declarations of pecuniary interest. Council, any declarations of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof today? I have one. Item 11.2.4, the subdivision agreement. I acted for the applicants in their purchase of the property, so I will be recusing myself from that matter. If there are no other items, then I will look for the motion for the adoption of the minutes. Councillor McLeod.
Be it resolved that the minute, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Berman, be it resolved that the minutes of the council meeting held February 11th, 2019, special meetings of council held February 13 and 28, 2019, be approved as presented.
Thank you. Council, any errors or omissions? Seeing none, then I will call the vote. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. Is there any business arising, council, from the previous minutes? Seeing none, we have community announcements, and I will ask the chair of the Heritage Committee, Betty Donaher, to come forward and take us through the Heritage Week 2019 presentations. Welcome.
Thank you. So, we had to skip February because of a snowstorm, so that's why it says Heritage Week, February 18th to 23rd. It's actually March now, but Heritage Committee Advisory Committee is made up of a great group of people. There's myself as chair, Andrea Leeming is the vice chair, members David Craig, Alyssa Ferris, Ellen Mary Mills, Steve Redmond, and our BIA representative is Penny Skelton. Our technical advisor is Ron Martin, and staff resources are Nancy Ferreira, Lynn Gowan, and Jessica Haley. This is the district here. The red outline is the Heritage District. Yes, the terminals are in that district, and the yellow are properties that are designated. Some of them are in the district, but some of them are heritage properties that are designated outside the district. Heritage Property Tax Relief, I can read it easier from here. This is a provincial program that's available as a financial tool for municipalities to help owners maintain and restore their properties for the benefit of the entire community. Today and into the future. Throughout Ontario, conserving heritage properties has helped revitalize historic town centres and attract residents, businesses, and visitors to the community. Collingwood is known for its downtown and how beautiful it is, and it attracts a lot of tourism here. To date, the total for this year, the total applications were 53. Received in 2018 with the approximate refund from all the government levels of $32,328. Our 2017 Heritage Grants at Work processed 7 Heritage Grant applications, which resulted over $103,622.85, which is important, and construction to value for the heritage buildings. Semi-annually, our Heritage newsletter is put out. It's mailed directly to all owners of designated properties. It's also available at the library, the building department, town hall, and the museum. And it's mailed to the provincial and federal heritage organizations. It's a great read if anybody's interested in heritage. So, last time I was here, I talked about our heritage walking tours that we've done, and at that time we just had the look-up tour and the downtown tour completed. Now we also have our Heritage East and our Heritage West done, so that's a total of 4 walking tours that will help people get around Collingwood. Would like to thank Carol Stewart from the Collingwood Public Library for all the work she put into it to help us get the information. Susan Warner and Melissa Shaw from the Collingwood Museum. Candice Curry and Margaret Moy, who put a lot of the information together and got it ready for print. And then myself, I worked on it as well. We do have partnerships in heritage in this area. Our biggest ones are the museum, and for some reason the library is not on here, but we do work with them. The town of Collingwood, ACO Collingwood helps keep us on our toes. The Gaslight Tour, the Historical Society, and the Center for Business and Development. Exciting news in heritage. We're receiving applications still for our major restoration and redevelopment programs. We're building our budget for the future heritage studies, including doing a request of proposal for the Heritage District expansion. We've been saving for 3 years, and we've now got our $30,000, which is enough to go forward and see whether or not we should be expanding the Heritage District. We're also considering increasing the percentage related to the Heritage Tax Relief Program. We're going to be bringing that forward in the next little while. Our 2018 Heritage Award. The first one, this picture here, and I don't know how to do the pointer thing. How do I get the red light? The red thing? Oh, there it is. So this one is the building. There's only a few pictures we could find of this building, but this is a picture of soldiers being welcomed home from overseas, and in 1919, in August 21st. The building in question is this one right here, which is 179 here, Ontario Street. This is another view of the same. It's right there. There's some buildings. It's not on our walking tours. We're going to have to add this block into it because it says an important building. This is what it looked like prior to the Johnsons fixing it up, and you can see, I'm trying to get my red light, it was, aluminum was put here, and this was painted. Now the painted part was done a few years back, and I don't believe they ever got an award for that. There's the new building now, what it looks like. It houses Koala Botanicals and the Collingwood Rock Shop. They took all the aluminum off that was here, redid this area up on the top, and all the wood trim, and the new doors. So we'd like to, sorry, this is one. So we'd like to thank the Johnson's group of Collingwood. I don't believe anybody's here from the group. The second award goes to 169 St. Paul Street. Everybody probably remembers or knows what this is. This was the old ambulance bay. And because it is adjacent to the Heritage District, they had to build a building that would complement it because of our bylaws. And so this is what they build in Simcoe County. But because of our bylaws, this is a sample. This is Aurelia here, their paramedic station. This is what we got. Isn't that an amazing building? And it complements the Heritage District so nicely. They had to have a heritage impact assessment done, and it had to blend into the area around it. And the county was very cooperative with the town of Collingwood with this project, and this design is what was chosen. And we really would like to thank them for that, because that was a lot of extra money to spend. heritage updates. If you remember last year, the 35 Simcoe Street was the one where, I don't have a picture of it, but it was where the salon, Fearless Vanity was. And they redid the brick, they took the windows, fixed that up. They're still doing the above the door. But if you look up, way up, you'll see on top of the parapets, they've actually done, instead of the round balls that you were there originally when the building was built, they now have these conical, and it's amazing that they would do that much work. 40 Simcoe Street, we're working with Black Bellows, and they are very cooperative with us about turning Gay's Auto Body into a wonderful pub. So that's it.
Thank you, Ms. Dyer. Council, any questions on that presentation? Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Betty, thank you very much for that presentation. The Heritage Committee does great work in the community. I have a question, though, in regard to heritage expansion. What is the rationale to expand the Heritage District?
As you know, a lot of people come to Collingwood and look at Collingwood for our heritage area. We have a unique downtown. We are one of, and I'm not 100% sure, Lynn might be able to help me with this. We were one of the first ones that came up with the Heritage District in Ontario. And Nancy, can you help me on this? You know the answers, I'm pretty sure. Because you were the one who instigated it, you and Rob.
Certainly, thank you, and through Mayor Saunderson to Councillor Doherty. I don't know whether we were first, but we were certainly very early. I believe Niagara-on-the-Lake is also very early. But we're certainly one of the early heritage or conservation districts in the province, and we're also one of the biggest.
Right. So in answer to your question, we want to keep the downtown core, or we are hoping to keep the downtown core more of Collingwood with our heritage look instead of turning it into a high-rise area. And that's why we're looking at the expansion. When it's done and when we hire somebody to look at the different areas, there's 3 different areas that we're thinking of expanding to. Then it comes to council and the homeowners to see whether or not they want to do that. But we would like to see more of our heritage kept and looked after.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Council, we will quickly, yes?
There's nobody to present.
There's no one to present to, so,
Okay.
and we already did the county, and they were very appreciative of that.
Thank you.
So we'll go around the table quickly then to do community announcements, knowing that we have 2 deputations, a public meeting, and a full agenda. So I'll ask people to be selective tonight. I'll start with you, Deputy Mayor.
Sure, I have nothing this evening.
That was fast. Councillor McLeod.
I would like to invite anybody who has ever wanted a taste of curling. Yes, curling again, I'm sorry. The Collingwood Curling Club is wrapping up its season this year in a unique way, putting together a full day of the best players in the league on March the 26th, with games starting at 1 o'clock, and at 7 o'clock there will be bagpipers and a full-on day of curling for those of you who got a little taste of it at the Briar this weekend.
Curling Club will be cutting loose. Councillor Comey.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just very quickly with the full house, I'll take this opportunity to remind anybody who hasn't done so yet to please put their input on Sunset Point Park into Parks and Recreation. You have from now until March 22nd on the town website, or these cards I'm sure Director Culver has sprinkled around town. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Madigan.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Councillor Comey, for mentioning that. Much appreciated. My only community announcement tonight is Miss Leah Denbach. I'm so happy that she is here. And I've known Leah for about 5 or 6 years, and she was the quietest little girl that you would ever want to meet. And I always wondered what was behind those quiet eyes, and we're going to see that tonight when she gives a presentation. So, good luck.
Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a very super quick shout out to staff and members of council who were behind our first International Women's Day celebration. It was sold out. It was an amazing event, and we've culminated with a flag raising, and we're, I think, looking forward very much to something even bigger and better next year. So thank you.
It was a great event. Councillor Berman.
Thank you, Mayor Sanderson. Just one quick one. The new library board had their first meeting on Thursday, February 28th, and I wanted to publicly congratulate Nina Robitaille and Margaret Adolph, who were acclaimed as chair and vice chair respectively.
Councillor Hamlin.
Nothing this evening, Your Worship.
Okay, I have one quick announcement. As you know, we are into our budgeting process. We had an SIC meeting last week, and we will have a follow-up SIC meeting this Thursday coming, March 14th. Council will be meeting, or the committee will be meeting between 4 and 6. Between 6 and 6:45, there will be coffee with council, so we can speak with the residents who are here and interested in the budget. And then we will have the public session where deputants will have up to 10 minutes to comment on the budget moving forward. So hopefully we'll see lots of people here on Thursday for input on the upcoming budget. We'll now move into the public meeting portion. Welcome to Collingwood's public planning meeting. Members of the public will be invited to offer their comments or concerns respecting the proposal once staff have completed their review. Once the public portion of the meeting has been completed, no more public discussion will be allowed. Before closing, I will ask 3 times for further comments. I will then ask council members if they have any final questions for staff. It is very important that the town receive the correct names and addresses, including postal code of the individuals having an interest in the planning application. Therefore, if you plan to speak to council at this meeting, or if you want to be notified of any future council or committee meetings concerning the application being considered today, you must complete one of the interested party forms located on the table behind the podium. Under the Planning Act, only those who have verbally expressed any comments or concerns here tonight or provided a written submission of any comments or concerns prior to council's enactment of the bylaw have the right to appeal any decision of council to the local planning appeal tribunal. And if you do not make an oral submission this evening or a written submission to council before the bylaw is passed, you may not be added as a party to an appeal before the local planning appeal tribunal unless, in the opinion of the tribunal, there are reasonable grounds to do so. This public hearing is being recorded. Your name, address, comments, and any other personal information are being recorded according to the Municipal Act and the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. The minutes will be available to the general public, including the town's website. I will now ask the clerk to confirm that notification to the public has been given as required under the Planning Act. Your comments.
Certainly through yourself, Your Worship, members of council and the public, I can confirm that notice for the zoning bylaw amendment being heard this evening was provided in accordance with the Planning Act on January 31st, 2019, and originally it's been rescheduled from the meeting of Monday, February 25th to tonight's meeting, March 11th.
Thank you very much. And I'll look to Director Farrar to tell us who's going to take us through this tonight.
Thank you very much, Mayor Saunderson. It's Senior Planner Trevor Houghton who will be doing the presentation this evening.
Welcome, Trevor.
Your Worship, Deputy Mayor, members of council. Tonight's public meeting is regarding the shipyard's harborfront collection zoning amendment. The applicant is FS Collingwood Development Limited. The agent is Bennett McNeil. The application was received in November 22nd, 2018. The property is located at North Pine Street and Wheelhouse Crescent. The lot area is approximately 0.6 hectares. And there's a related file, which is the site plan control agreement, which is D11-1818. As touched on by the clerk, this is the notice of public meeting that was originally circulated and advertised in the Collingwood Connection on the 31st of January. This is an aerial photo of the subject property. The subject property is that portion of land that is outlined in red. In terms of the official plan, these lands are located in the shipyard special policy area, which is official plan amendment number 2. And the lands are specifically designated medium density residential. This land use designation permits the proposed use of the townhouses. The land use designation permits a minimum of 50 units to a maximum of 220 units. And with the completion of this proposal, there would be 90 units in total, including the side launch 2 buildings that you have yet to approve. Continuing on with the official plan, is part of the Collingwood urban structure. These lands are located inside the built boundary. They are also located in the Collingwood intensification area. And the built boundary are those areas established in the town that as of June 16th, 2006, the development has for the most part either occurred or typically did occur. And by 2015, it's the town's target that 40% of our development would be every year after that would be located within the built boundary. So the current zoning is deferred residential, which is DR, and the proposed zoning would be a residential third density exception. And the purpose and effect of that rezoning would be the development of the 13 townhouse dwellings. Again, as typical for the shipyards, the R3 exception zone would be tailored specifically to the site plan and urban design merits of the project, which we've used on all of the shipyards proposals to date. And the chart that you see below gives council a taste of what the probable requirements for the exception zone would be. These numbers are still in flux because we haven't had an opportunity to finalize the site plan as of yet. This is a proposed, or this slide is the proposed site plan. Again, it's 13 dwelling units. Building A is 4 units, building B is 6, and building C is 3 units. This proposal would be developed as part of a planned condominium, and those areas that you see circled in red indicate where those zoning reductions would be required that I just listed out. Go. In terms of comments received from the Nottawasaga Conservation Authority, the NVCA has reviewed the proposed zoning bylaw amendment, and based on their mandate, they have no objection to the proposed rezoning application. From the Town Environmental Services, the water treatment plant is currently operating at 78% capacity. Ministry guidelines state plant expansion should be initiated at the 80% capacity mark. The town is initiating that expansion, however, this could take anywhere from 4 to 5 years. Therefore, the town would be recommending that a holding zone be applied to the property with respect to available water treatment plant capacity. And then this provision could be lifted as the development planning proceeds or as it goes in stages. And lastly, we also received comments from two local residents at number 1 Shipyard Lane expressing their support for the zoning bylaw amendment. That concludes our presentation. The applicant is here and he would like to address council briefly.
Good, thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor Saunderson, Deputy Mayor, and members of council. My name is Fred Serafero. I'm one of the principals at Franklin. We've had the pleasure to be in front of you a number of times before in the past, and most recently with a number of the separate condominium applications for the completions of this wonderful project here on the Collingwood Harbour. This specifically is our last phase of townhomes. This will complete the majority of the site. We still have one parcel of land left where eventually we're hoping to do more development in the coming years. This particular site was originally thought of as a higher density. There was at one point where we were looking to put a potential 6-story building, but most recently we've decided to basically downzone it to 13 townhomes. There'll be 3 blocks, as Trevor has indicated. 2 of them are waterfront townhomes. The idea is to complete this this year. So our plan would be to get a site plan approval and some servicing and have construction started this year. And so the other advantage will be able to take down the black plywood that separates this whole from the waterfront park. So I think we look forward to completing the shipyard in the coming year, next year. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Questions?
Sheffield. We'll have the public portion, and then if there's any questions, we'll get back to you. Thank you. So I will now make the first call then for comments from the public. This is your opportunity to speak on this application. So you'll come forward, please. Good afternoon, Matthew. Make sure you sign in before you leave. And we're talking about the harbour front proposal.
Due to the storm 2 weeks ago, I think this was on the agenda, and I thought earlier about how I wanted to comment about this, and you know, we all know the dangers of the harbor. Like, it's a deep water, mixed seasonal area that Public Works is obviously taking care of. There's life buoys and benches, and there's lots of room to walk. The chain link, the chain fence that goes around the new dock, it's all great. And I wanted to come forward and say, you know, this is really fun because this is the last portion of the west side shipyard site. And this amendment that it's not going to be as high as the picture was showing along the walkway. I think the homes look good down there. The townhouses have a friendly appeal to them. It looks like a friendly design. And I just want to say, this is a really good news story because the actual site has been revitalized. And that was the word I think I had left myself, was talk about revitalization. You know, and I think it's time for us to stop talking about tearing things down, like the elevator and other things, and start taking care of what this town was based around. And we need to get serious and support the finalization and any other projects coming along for the waterfront. It's time we be a lot more appreciative of these types of developments. And as far as I'm concerned, this should be on the front news of the paper and talking about the waterfront and the fact that this has been a project for at least 15 years, the talks. This has gone back to the 2000s. So we need to talk about this and say, you know what, good job, let's support it, and let's not go the other way. Let's talk about, you know, getting things done and getting it done right, and getting some activity down there and bringing life back to that area of town. So, you know, I'm all for it, and I think it's amazing to see the transformation that has happened over probably 10 years now. So.
Perfect timing, Matt. You got it right under 5 minutes.
All
Thank
right,
you for that
sounds
ringing
good.
endorsement.
Sounds good.
I'll make sure you sign
I'll
it.
sign away there.
Good.
Okay.
Thank you. Second call for comments from the public. Seeing none, I'm going to call it for the third and final time. All right, we'll close the public portion of the meeting then, and I'll look around the council table. Council, any questions or comments on this project before we move on? Councillor Hamlin.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, my question would be for Trevor. Okay. I noticed that the request for the variances to the bylaw hadn't been set yet because the site plan details haven't been sorted. So I was wondering, when this bylaw comes forward for approval by council, will you have all those details?
Through your worship, what we would propose to do is bring the zoning amendment and the site plan forward to council at the same time. That way, when you're being asked to review the zoning amendment, you'll be also looking at the site plan agreement at the same time.
Oh, that's perfect. Thank you so much.
Good, thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Through you to Mr. Houghton, or perhaps other staff as you deem fit. It's specific to the holding, the H that would be applied. Mr. Houghton, can you just explain, this is a project that is now having a reduction in density from what it was originally proposed, a significant reduction. So how does that original proposal to the one that's being put forward today apply to the percentages for water and wastewater? And the reason I'm raising the question is in the context, I believe all of us have received correspondence from members of the public as it relates to capacity.
Through your worship, I believe Mr. McDonald would like to answer that question for you.
Right?
Through your worship to the Deputy Mayor, the provision of H is something we've been asking on all developments that are subject to future approvals. This is a preliminary approval, it's not the final approval. The final approval would be the site plan. And so we are asking for that as a tool to manage supply in terms of capacity, given that we are at 80% capacity now. There's a lot of potential for developments to come in and eat up that capacity with preliminary approval and have an expectation that they have capacity. So this is a forewarning to the developer that there is potential of capacity issues if we don't move forward with the necessary upgrades that we have to do. There's still sufficient capacity within the plant. It's just a matter of managing those developments as they come online so that they traditionally we've been including that as draft plan conditions, so this is an enhanced tool to give us protection against capacity.
Good. Any more questions, council? Thank you, Trevor.
You're welcome.
We will now move on to deputations, and we'll call up first Leah Denbach. Leah has distinguished herself worldwide with bringing attention to the homelessness crisis here in Ontario, and she's a Collingwood resident, an accomplished photographer, and I think recently spoke, or in the last 12 months anyway, at the Me to We organization. She followed the UN Secretary General and I think spoke to 20,000 people. So tonight's a little smaller for you, Leah, but thank you very much for taking the time.
Your Worship, Deputy Mayor, and members of Council, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you all this evening. My name is Leah Denbach, and I am an 18-year-old first-year photography student at Sheridan College. And as you are no doubt aware, homelessness is definitely becoming a pressing issue here in Collingwood. And I'm hoping through this presentation to simply raise awareness about the problem of homelessness in general, as well as the plight of people experiencing homelessness. Having photographed over 500 people experiencing homelessness over the past few years, I have come to see that the plight of homelessness goes much deeper than the stereotypes that much people have of them. For example, to say of people experiencing homelessness, as many do, that they are lazy or that they have chosen to be on the streets, is simply inaccurate. To help you see this, I would like to share with you some of their photographs and stories of people experiencing homelessness that I've had the privilege of meeting. Up until 3 years ago, Kimberly, together with her partner Maddie of 11 years, and their 7 children, all lived happily together in a home of their own in Brisbane, Australia. In 2015, we had a house fire, she told my mum and I. Everyone was okay, but we lost the kids to child safety, and we ended up homeless. Sadly, Kimberly now feels as though everyone, including social services, has given up on her and Maddie. She told us that losing our children has been very hard on her. However, she does get to see the kids weekly, the boys on Fridays, the boys one week and the girls the next. This has helped somewhat to ease her pain. But her immediate goal is to get a job, hopefully enabling her to get a place of her own and to get her children back. She currently sleeps under a bridge. There's only one small problem. She lost all of her identification in the fire, and without it, she is unable to get a job. Although she is only in her 20s, she told us that she feels as though she is very old. I am an open book, Dexter declared at the beginning of our interview with him, and he wasn't kidding, for no sooner than we began to ask him a couple of questions than Dexter opened up to us about the horrific events that shook the foundations of his world. I used to live in Osaka, Japan, Dexter told us, until my wife and son died. A drunk driver. My son was 15 years old. My wife was taken back for a medical exam that day, and I could have taken the day off work, but I didn't. And because of that, she took the subway and was hit by a drunk driver. And 8 other people were also killed that day. And I kind of got myself down about that. When we met Dexter, he was living by himself in a tent under the Gardiner Expressway in Toronto. And Dexter told us that he did 3 tours of duty in Iraq, during which time he was taken prisoner of war, and he has several scars on his shoulders and back to prove it. And despite referring to himself as a dumb donkey, he speaks no less than 13 languages. And I ask you, can we say of Dexter or of Kimberly that they have chosen to be on the streets or that they are lazy. Or consider the story of Mary Ellen. She told us that she has been on the streets almost as long as she can remember. I left home at 11, she told my dad and I. I raised myself. Yeah, the apartments are torn down now, but I used to sleep in the hallways and stuff like that. And I used to couch surf, although I didn't have any friends. Now, 54, Mary Ellen admitted to us that she struggles with mental illness. I have bipolar personality disorder, she said, and I have mental illness. When I was 6 years old, I'd spent 6 months in a mental hospital. Where do you sleep during the cold winter months, my dad asked her. University Avenue in the Out of the Cold. Out of the Cold is an emergency program that helps people experiencing homelessness by providing them with food, sleeping mats, and shelter during the cold winter months. And although Mary Ellen has several children, she has no contact with them. I have 5 children, she told us, but they won't talk to me. So just as she was as a young girl of 11, Mary Ellen is homeless and alone. My mother and I came across Rodney as he was getting a free hot meal beside a centre in Brisbane, Australia, run by the Red Cross. He told us the following extraordinary story. Let me give you the short version without putting too much into it. I owned a construction company in Southeast Asia. I never got paid by a mining company. I tried to carry on the case for 3.5 to 4 years afterwards. In the end, I had to admit defeat. So I got all of my employees and subtractors together and I paid everything that I owed. That was approximately 7 years ago. The case had, of course, personal and professional ramifications. My wife has gone insane. She doesn't know who I am. She doesn't know anyone anymore. She's in a mental institution now. We're in the last stages of the case at the present moment. They owe me so much money now that I have difficulty spending it at $1,000 a minute. I've won the court case twice before. In the last 5 years, they can appeal up to 3 times. This is the 3rd time it's gone through the court now. We're in the 4th week of the case. It is set down for 12 weeks, and I'm hopeful, very hopeful. I've been lucky to have my support from previous employees and friends. That's it in a nutshell. And I ask you again, could we say of Mary Ellen or of Rodney that they are lazy or that they have chosen to be on the streets? But if it is inaccurate to say of people experiencing homelessness that they are lazy or that they have chosen to be on the streets, what are the main causes of homelessness? Perhaps the number one factor contributing to homelessness is lack of affordable housing. For example, when I was photographing Kai and Tim by the Eaton Centre in 2017, they told me that it is predominantly because of lack of affordable housing that people like themselves find themselves on the street. Speaking of last year, Kai said, I had a place in Montreal in the winter, and it was cheap compared to Vancouver, like $800 a month, and we'd pay about $200 each, or whatever. But if you did that here in Toronto, it would be what, like $1,800? And in Vancouver, what, like $2,000? It makes you feel like, how am I ever going to get a place of my own? A second closely related factor contributing to homelessness is poverty. This is the case with Jeff, whom we met outside of the Hamilton Booth Centre run by the Salvation Army, in which he had been kicked out of. All he had in his possession was an oversized pair of pants that were so large that he had to hold them up. Some people on the streets also struggle with drug addiction. For example, Jeff candidly admitted to us that slowly, I have become addicted to drugs, which I stopped for about 7 years. And by stop, I mean recreational. I do a little bit of it over here and there, but since I got on the streets, that's all we do. My dad and I have also encountered several people experiencing homelessness that struggle with mental illness. Take, for example, Nisha. We met Misha as she was rummaging through a pile of clothes on the sidewalk outside of the Hamilton Booth Center. And during my photo shoot with her, she talked for about 4 minutes, seemingly without taking a breath, about such diverse subjects as Freud, World War II, traffic congestion, Morse code, carburetors, and Hitler. Unfortunately, most of what she said made no sense whatsoever. But since the topic that seemed to fascinate her the most seemed to be psychology, we asked her if she'd perhaps studied this at university. She said, no. They unfortunately accused me of being mentally ill, here, there, and everywhere, and I ended up with all sorts of questions that begged to be answered, such as why am I there? Another leading cause contributing to homelessness, especially among young people, is family dysfunction. Take, for example, Keith, a young man who we met sleeping on the ground outside of the Hamilton Supercrawl event in 2017, told us that he has no contact with his biological parents and has a pending court case against his stepmother. And Izzy told us that it's in part because of the strained relationship with her father and stepmother that she finds herself on the street. Speaking of this broken relationship, she said, it all started when I was 14, and when I was 15, I had to leave home. Whatever, I'm gonna live my own life one day. Although Izzy has a 2.5-year-old sister back home in Montreal, she has no contact with her. I have a sister back home, but I don't get to see her because her mother doesn't like me and her dad and I don't talk. So, her voice trailing off. At this point, you may be wondering, what can I do to help people experiencing homelessness? And I want to suggest to you 3 things. Firstly, we can all treat people experiencing homelessness with respect. For example, if you pass them on the street, you can say, hello, how are you doing today? Or if you have time to stop and chat with them, since most people just ignore them, you'd be surprised how much they appreciate the attention. And as you've heard, many of them have really amazing stories to tell. Secondly, we can financially support organizations that help people experiencing homelessness, such as the Home Horizons here in Collingwood. These organizations have the know-how and resources to best help these people, and they're often cash-strapped and could really use our financial support. Incidentally, I donate 100% of the profits of the work that I do with people experiencing homelessness back to homeless shelters. Thirdly, we can pressure the government, both nationally and provincially, to build more affordable housing. David Giffen, the executive director of the Coalition of the Homeless in New York City, says, the vast majority of people experiencing homelessness are simply there because of lack of affordable housing. It is exceedingly rare for people to choose to be on the streets unless they have no other rational options. In nearly 30 years of my involvement with people experiencing homelessness, I have yet to meet anyone that would choose to turn their back on an affordable place to live. We must always work hard to dispel the myth that people are homeless by choice, when in fact no choice exists. In closing, I want to read to you a statement by Edward Everett. I am only one, but still I am one. I cannot do everything, but I can do something. And because I cannot do everything, let me not refuse to do the something that I can do. Thank you.
Thank you, Leah. Very powerful. Are there any questions or comments, Council, for Leah? Seeing none, thank you very much. So with that segue and getting everyone's attention, I'll now call forward Fiona Proctor from the Simcoe County Alliance to End Homelessness to talk about what we are doing in our region to try and address homelessness. Welcome, Fiona.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Saunderson and Deputy Mayor Hall and the council. So, hello everyone. Thank you, Leah. That was exceptional. And I always start off thinking too that one doesn't wake up in the morning and go, gee, I think I'd like to be homeless today. I don't think anybody ever wakes that up and thinks that to themselves. So I'm Fiona Proctor, I'm a registered nurse, and in the past I've presented to you on behalf of the Simcoe Municipal District Health Unit. I am currently, I've switched jobs now and I'm working with Community Connection, helping and working with health and housing. I'm also the co-chair of the South Georgian Bay SCADA chapter, and with me today is Gail Mikolenko. our SCATA project coordinator, and Pam Hillier, Community Connection, is also a member of SCATA as well, and I'll give you a brief definition of what SCATA means. So SCATA is the Simcoe County Alliance to End Homelessness, and so their mission is strictly to end homelessness in Simcoe County, and it's led by a steering committee made up of 60+ representatives from 5 chapters, including South Georgian Bay and key community partners in housing and in health. So in 2018, there was a homeless enumeration that took place that provides a count of the number of people experiencing homelessness in Simcoe County. As you can see, the number is close to 700 across Simcoe County and 24 in Collingwood. Through this process, there's no way for us to know whether this is the full extent of people experiencing homelessness in Collingwood. We know at least there are 24, there are most likely more, but they could be hidden or we didn't reach them in that point in time count. So this is a big long slide, but I want to quickly touch on the different services that we do have here in Collingwood. So Housing First is designed to house and provide intense supports and a rent supplement to those who are in high acuity complex. So they look for landlords. The housing case manager provides ongoing supports to ensure participants sustain their housing and are good tenants. There's rapid rehousing for moderate acuity, so up to 9 months rent assistance. And then there's housing support services for low acuity and searching for new housing. We also have My Friend's House, which offers shelter for women and their children fleeing family violence. When there is an available space, they will assist women who are homeless due to their high risk of violence if they are out on their own. The Salvation Army is funded to offer emergency motel stays, typically restricted to 7-night stays. There were 136 applications in 2017. Home Horizon offers transitional housing, 7 beds, for homeless youth for up to 2 years. They provide life skills to prepare for independent living, budgeting, meal prep, tenant rights, etc., and they connect youth to the appropriate counseling needs. Community Connection supports individuals to access emergency shelter and help navigate individuals to other appropriate services and resources, because quite frequently when you are without a house, you also don't have food and the material goods that you need. Rent supplements may be available, but typically they have no openings, and clients receiving this Canadian Mental Health Association services may be eligible for a rent supplement as well. So that's currently what we have here in Collingwood. We also know that South Georgian Bay is the most underserved area in Simcoe County. We are unable to meet the needs of the most vulnerable of our community, those with low income, those that are precariously housed, and those experiencing homelessness. So what are the unmet needs? This is still 2016 data, and I imagine that it's bigger now, but we know that there were 709 households on the wait list for rent geared to income housing in Collingwood. That's not Simcoe County, that's Collingwood. And rent geared to income means that you're paying 30% of your income to housing so that you are able to afford to live for the rest of your other needs, like utilities and food and clothing and transportation. So we know that we are getting a new affordable housing development. There's 147 units under construction. Only 30 of those units are rent geared to income. While these additional units are a welcome addition to Collingwood's housing stock, with rents at the affordable rates, which means that they're more at market rent, or 20% below market rent, those who are in the lowest income levels still cannot afford one of these units. So only 30 of those will be affordable for the rent geared to income. So our service gaps and challenges here in Collingwood. So while the emergency bed program funded by Simcoe County and managed through the Salvation Army provides some refuge for some of Collingwood's homeless, it's no longer meeting the growing needs for shelter. There are no emergency shelter options for youth under the age of 18. If you are over 18 and present as experiencing homelessness after 10 p.m., the motels are closed, and frequently there are no motels rooms available for a variety of reasons. The homeless population who are unsheltered is growing in part due to the lack of, as Leah had mentioned, the affordable permanent housing. So essentially, after 10 p.m., you won't get a bed for sure. If you're under 18, we don't have anything for you here in Collingwood. So, work in progress. Out of the Cold is coming. We're currently looking at area churches, so one location, rotating operations with multiple locations, that has to be established. Then we also have volunteers through the general community of faith organizations. The volunteer center will do the screening and coordinate the training for these volunteers. We'll need meals by the host or businesses or service clubs on a rotating basis. This is all being worked out. Supplies, donations for base supplies, personal and hygiene supplies. We'll need things like help desk and information referral, mobile health clinic, laundry for the services. We still have to determine who the lead organization is going to be, and there will be a community meeting at the end of April to discuss this Out of the Cold program that will be coming with hopes to start up for November of 2019. So, what does this mean in the grand scheme of things? And this is where I think is really important to understand how we all connect into this system and how we can get people connected to the services that they need. So SCADA, the Simcoe County Alliance to End Homelessness, is working with the County of Simcoe to participate in Built for Zero, led by the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness. So you can see at the very bottom, Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness. So Built for Zero is a rigorous national change effort designed to help committed communities in the US and in Canada end chronic and veteran homelessness. And I will skip on to the next one here. So here you can see all the red dots in Canada are where we have participating Built for Zero communities, and in the States there are 64 US communities, and the highlighted in blue are where they have gotten down to a zero. So on the American side, they've reduced their population of people experiencing homelessness to functional zero. And what's functional zero, you ask? So this is 3 or less chronic homeless over 3 months, which means that if we have 3 people that present as experiencing homelessness within 3 months when we house them, we've achieved functional zero, which means that everybody is getting housed in a short period of time. And it seems almost futuristic thinking, but this is what we can get to, and this is what's happening in the US, and this big change movement is happening here in Canada and now also in Simcoe County. There are 3 key areas of work to achieve this. We are working on building and activating a broad local team. That's already happening. We're currently working on a by name list, which is a real-time list of all people experiencing homelessness in Simcoe County. It will also inform a coordinated access system. So this is a community-wide system that streamlines the process for people experiencing homelessness to access the system, uses a common assessment and prioritization tool, and a service map referral process. This will ultimately lead to housing and the appropriate supports for people. So rather than one person entering into the maze by themselves, they would present in one area, sort of like a no wrong door approach. They would get assessed, move through to their most appropriate supports, and then get them into hopefully the housing that they are so needing. And I will leave you with just a brief recap because that was a lot. I covered basically what was happening here in Collingwood. We're working on this. We have the South Georgian Bay SCADA chapter working on local solutions. We know that people are experiencing homelessness in Collingwood, and currently there are gaps in service, around emergency and permanent housing. We know that the Out of the Cold program is being developed to be up and running for this coming November. And Built for Zero is a proven program transforming the homelessness system in Simcoe County. Thank you for listening, and do you have any questions?
Thank you, Fiona. Council, any questions?
Hi.
Councilor McLeod.
Through you, Your Worship. Thank you for that presentation. I have a question about how we're only expecting to have an Out of the Cold program in Collingwood in November of 2019. I mean, it's not a surprise that the need is there. Basements and gymnasiums of the churches are large and warm, and we have a huge volunteer base. I'm just thinking about the Out of the Cold walk that we did a few weeks ago. There's a huge group of volunteers. Can you walk me through how come it's taking this long? Are there permits and stuff?
No, so through Mayor Saunderson, It is complicated just because of the sheer volume, and the biggest piece, and this is from Alliston Out of the Cold Learnings, is maintaining volunteers, because it's not as simple as just saying we have volunteers. It means we need volunteers who are appropriately trained, who can stay overnight with vulnerable individuals who may be experiencing anything from mental health issues to addictions. It's also establishing, there's multiple pieces to establish, so there is a committee working on it. And the other piece is from a safety perspective of everybody involved, literally, because I've had churches come up to say, I'll open up the doors right away, I'll do it tomorrow. From a safety perspective, it really has to be done properly, because we're working with people who are really experiencing a lot of issues. And a lot of, and I don't even mean issues, and maybe I'm using the wrong words. Could I ask Gail or Pam to maybe answer this one in particular? May I ask that of them? Is that
Sure.
okay?
With the Out of the Cold program, we have a number of training that goes on, and a number of the volunteers who participate in the Out of the Cold program actually will be a part of that training. Just recently, we had trauma and suicide as a workshop, and there were some of the Out of the Cold program from Alliston who participated in that. And so, actually, in some cases, if you don't have properly trained people, you can do more harm than good. And so it's, definitely requires a well thought out, well planned, initiation of the program. And it also, needs to look at the best practices that have taken place both in Alliston and Barrie.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to Ms. Proctor. Thank you very much for coming and bringing this to our attention. We talk a lot about the need for affordable housing. This really puts it in perspective and puts some dark numbers behind it. You mentioned that there's no solution for young people. But it was my understanding that Home Horizons was fulfilling that need as far as homeless youth were concerned.
So, thank you, through Your Worship. Home Horizons is a transitional bed unit, which means that it's not emergency. It means that youth who are admitted into that program or go into that program voluntarily are there for a 2-year span or upwards of a 2-year span to learn basic life skills. And my understanding is it's not appropriate to also have emergency housing in the same. So the place for emergency shelter that we would have to send youth to in this area, we would have to send them to Barrie to go to Youth Haven.
It's not appropriate to have them, if you have a youth who's in a crisis, you can't really, it's not fair to the youth that are there. This is their home, and for up to 2 years. And so to introduce a youth who is in crisis at that point in time would not be, in the best interest of the other youth who are in the home. It would be too chaotic.
Thank you.
Councillor Conley.
Thank you. Through Your Worship, thank you, Fiona. Lovely presentation, very concerning. So 2 questions, please. The first is, of those 24 homeless in Collingwood, do we know the ages at that time? Is it mainly youth? Is it a sort of even mix?
It was a mix. We have seniors who are homeless. We have, and obviously we have youth, and in between. So that was a mix, and it absolutely does not represent the full spectrum of the people who are homeless in Collingwood, simply because that was a 1-day count, and the day that we had it was absolutely freezing cold April and raining like you would not believe, and so it was very difficult for the volunteers who did the count to even locate it absolutely does not, represent the full spectrum of people that we have in our community who are experiencing homelessness.
As a follow-up question to that, when would we look at new numbers or a new count?
It's every 2 years.
Okay.
And so that was last April, and so it'll be April 2020.
And may I just add to that, as we move forward into the Built for Zero agenda, we will have, as people begin to consent to being put on the by name list, then we won't need to wait for a full point in time count. We'll be able to do it in real time, and we'll have a general understanding of who's experiencing what in which areas immediately.
Okay, thank you. And then to touch on Councillor Doherty's point of, again, going back to that under 18 youth, after 10 o'clock at night, can you walk me through the scenario for them? Are we saying there's no option for them in the town of Collingwood? And what does that mean and who tells them that?
You go ahead. The hotels will not take them, and so we literally have no options for an under 18-year-old youth who is found on the streets.
So currently, in reality, where's your closest 24-hour Tim Hortons? Or if the police are involved, they will find somewhere for them to stay warm. But we don't have options. I would love to say that, I could snap my fingers, but we don't have options currently.
That's an important statement. Thank you so much.
Councillor Hammond.
Thank you. I just have a comment. I just wanted to thank you all, at Community Connection and the other groups that are working so hard on this. And just echo what Councillor Doherty said. We don't know, what you're telling us, and it's so helpful for us. So thank you for coming and working so hard on this issue.
Thank you very much, Gail. Thank you, Fiona. And for those that don't know, the Deputy Mayor is our representative on the SCADA committee, so if anyone has any follow-up questions, I'm sure they can give that through the Deputy Mayor. Thank you very much. So, Deputy Mayor.
Through to you, just to follow up on Councillor Comey's question with regards to the under 18, to sort of elaborate on your point and to demonstrate the problem on a higher level. The alternative is that our youth and others often find themselves going to Barrie or other communities. And the challenge there is twofold. One is that then it's taxing on the resources in those particular communities, but secondly, it's a domino effect in terms of all of the other services, whether it be transportation, police, the healthcare system, etc. And once somebody tends to leave a community, it's challenging for them to maybe come back. So it really is, to your point and to your point, Councillor Doherty, it's a significant issue, and I know that they're working very hard to provide solutions. And one final comment to Councillor McLeod, to your comment for a question. It's a valid question, and I think we had a very unfortunate incident that, we had an individual who was in the community, left our community, and ended up taking their life. And the reporting, Jessica, you did a phenomenal job of reporting not only the story from the outset, but the circumstances revolving around that particular individual. And there was a lot of reaction. And of course, our instinct as people, regardless of our background, is to want to jump in and solve the problem today. And the reason I'm just bringing that up is to your point, Gail, and that is that behind the scenes, there are people who are working on this particular issue. It will take time, and we do have to demonstrate some patience and with a target of next fall, because to your comments, if we don't get it right, we expose ourselves to far greater problems, and those are issues that, quite frankly, we're not equipped to deal with. Thanks.
Thank you to both our presenters today for shining a light on this critical issue.
Thank you.
Who would have the consent agenda? Councillor McLeod?
I have it.
Was it
I have it,
Councillor
Your
Comey?
Worship, yes.
Moved by me and seconded by Deputy Mayor Hall. Be it resolved that the consent agenda, having been given due consideration by council, be received. And those are items 8.1 through 8.8.
Council, first I'll call the vote on the agenda, and then we'll look at pulling items. So to receive the items, all in favor? That is carried unanimously. Council, are there items you'd like to pull? Councillor Hamlin.
Just 8.6, please.
Any others, council? I would like to pull 8.4, so we'll start with you then, Councillor Hamlin.
Yes, through you, your worship, I just had a question of staff, if this is the appropriate time to do that. This is a very interesting proposal by a company in town that wishes to add what they call a buy the glass facility. And I was just wondering if, and I guess this might be a question through you, Mr. Mayor, to Director Farrar, on whether the zoning for that particular property would allow this use, and whether we need a staff report on that issue.
Director Farrar.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. Way we often treat these types of uses is that where someone is manufacturing spirits or beer or whatever kind of alcoholic beverages, there is the ability in our zoning bylaw to have a small area that's set aside for sales of the product that is being manufactured on that particular site. So we do, in our zoning bylaw, we do allow something called accessory sales. I would suggest that this kind of tasting would fit under the accessory sales portion of our zoning bylaw. So I'm from a zoning perspective, it's not our biggest concern. It's probably more of a concern, Mayor Saunderson, through you to Councillor Hamlin, from a licensing perspective.
Just one follow-up question, if I may, through you, Mr. Mayor. I wasn't so worried about, the tasting component, but in the letter we received from the owner, he mentions that they would have the ability to sell mixed drinks of any product produced on site in a fashion similar to any other restaurant or bar. So that just got my thinking going, if this was going to be a bar or just a tasting facility, and I wonder if we have enough information for that.
Director Farrar.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. Through you to Councillor Hamlin, we would certainly be asking those kinds of questions. It's not where we would specifically allow a restaurant per se, but certainly in a number of instances we do allow tasting of products that are being manufactured on site.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
And I think we do have a motion on that item, so perhaps now would be a good time to deal with that. Do you have that motion, Councillor Comey?
I do, your worship. Moved by me, seconded by Deputy Mayor Hall. Be it resolved that council supports the issuance of a manufacturer's limited liquor sales license by the glass by the Alcohol and Gaming Commission of Ontario to Heretic Spirits Inc., located at 395 Raglan Street, Collingwood, Ontario.
Council, any questions or comments before I call the vote? Seeing none, then all in favor? That is passed unanimously. Thank you. Going back to item 8.4, this is a question through to Director Farrar. Just in the last paragraph of this letter talking about the Housing Supply Action Plan, it does mention the possible impacts on OP reviews. I'm wondering, Director Farrar, if you can just confirm for us what types of impacts those might be.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Saunderson. Certainly any official plan review that the town might proceed with would be set in the framework of the provincial policies. So any work that we would be doing really is based on and has to conform with and be consistent with the policies that come either from the growth plan, the provincial policy statement, or the Planning Act. So it does make our lower tier, because certainly we're kind of the bottom of the totem pole. Mayor Saunderson, as you know, I mean, the upper tier certainly might get the information first, we would get it second. But certainly it does make that job somewhat more difficult if we don't know what policies we have to meet and follow, because the province is in the middle of frankly changing them.
Thank you very much for the clarification, Nancy. All right, as I indicated at the outset of the meeting, we were going to bring forward item 12.2.1 from the Corporate Community Services docket and get into that before we deal with the SIC issue items. So, Councillor Madigan.
Thank you very much, Mayor Saunderson. I appreciate walking into the council chambers this evening and having all this information put in front of me and being told that I would be the one choosing what happens this evening by the motion that I put forward. So, shall I read the motion now, or can I make comments now or after?
I think we'll put the motion on the table, and certainly it will be council that makes the decision ultimately, but put the motion on the table and then we'll go around.
Thank you. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Berman. Be it resolved that staff report PRC 2019-05 be received and that council award tenancy to the Collingwood Colts and direct staff to finalize and execute a tenancy agreement with the team.
All right, we'll go around the table for comments. Council. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. Through you to the rest of the council and to the general public. I will be supporting a tenancy agreement for the Junior Colts Tier 2 Junior A program, and we'll be doing so based on the following. I would preface my comments by saying that although Collingwood has a deep and long history of hockey that is entrenched within the community, for someone, myself, who spends an awful lot of time between two arenas here in the community, I've had very little conversation or interaction with anyone as it relates to this matter prior to March the 4th, which was last Monday. We then have the two presentations last Monday evening before the committee, and since then, I have, I think, like many around the table, have had a number of conversations and have been approached or have had communiques sent to us questioning our thoughts, giving their thoughts, suggesting things that we should look at, etc. And I appreciate those that have taken the time to reach out, and I appreciate the background, the information, etc. But at the end of the day, in my opinion, and I say this with all due respect, this is not a hockey decision for this council to make. This is a business decision. And although we have a long-standing history within the community of minor hockey and junior hockey, at the end of the day, it's what we need to be looking at 5 years, 10 years down the road, and what business proposal gives the community, or I should say organization, the best basis for success. And I dare say that unfortunately when junior hockey left the community 8 years ago, and the last championship or successful organization that was here in the community prior to that, that the big change within the community and elsewhere is that never has there been a time when the demands or the opportunities, depending on how you look at it, for the discretionary dollar been so taxing. And there are so many different opportunities for people who are looking for entertainment to be able to spend their money in the way they see fit. And when I look at the history that Collingwood has as it relates specifically to hockey, I've enjoyed speaking with, and I do enjoy speaking with people in the community who will talk to you about their experiences going to see junior hockey at the Memorial Arena behind us on a Friday night here in Collingwood. And they'll talk about the various players, the various people within the community that were part of those teams, etc., and the successes that those organizations had. They will also, some will also lament or talk about in the framework that at that time, it was maybe from an entertainment perspective, the only game in town, so to speak. And then it goes back to my comment today, and that is that today, junior hockey, minor hockey, is not the only game in town. And therefore, in awarding a successful tenancy agreement, it really is on the basis of ensuring that, again, whoever is running the program can sustain the ups and downs, the challenges, the economics that are related to running a minor organization or a junior organization today. There's been a lot of discussion about which organization or which league could provide a better opportunity for those who are playing hockey here in the community, i.e. boys and girls, in this case it would be boys, who are, say, born and raised in Collingwood. The reality is, and I stand to be corrected, but the reality is we, as a center for minor hockey, are known as a double B, and that those kids who show signs of exceptional skill or whose parents choose to pursue the dream are taking their children and they are moving them to centers, whether it be Grey Bruce, whether it be Barrie, whether it be elsewhere, that offer AA, AAA programs. And those children therefore are leaving minor hockey well before they would be entertaining the thought of a junior program down the road. I acknowledge that some of them may have an opportunity to come back and play here in Collingwood, but again, we can't focus our decision on whether or not we're providing a program opportunity for maybe 2, 3 players at a time. We've got to make sure that we make it a decision that's business sound so that the program is here 5, 10 years down the road to ensure that the program is successful for the betterment of the fan base, for the betterment of the business community, for the greater community as a whole. And that would be my justification for supporting the Colts program.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councilor Berman.
Thank you. Can I ask for a recorded vote, please?
Yes. Councilor Madigan.
Just respect to be able to speak last if I may.
Okay. Council members, any others around the table? Councilor McLeod.
I'd like to echo the sentiments put forward by Deputy Mayor Hall regarding the possibility of a team with such deep pockets and lots and lots of experience across the area, having a team in our town that might be here 10 years from now, and I completely concur. And that, however, being said, I'm not sure whether I'm to be impressed or to be annoyed at what appears to me to be sort of a strong arm tactic towards this council regarding the encroachment issue and the letters that have been flying and the not so veiled threats being made that if we don't pick the junior A team that we don't get a team at all. So I would say that I'm coming to this vote with a little bit of trepidation, and on part of me admires that this team is this team's management is sort of getting in the corner and finishing their checks, and I certainly hope that the coaching staff teaches them the same sort of tenacity.
All right, before I get to Councilor Madigan, then I will make my comments as well. First of all, I'd like to thank staff. I think this was a long and arduous process, and it had to be very nimble in responding from 8 years or 6 years with no offers, and I know Director Culver has worked very hard at working with the Junior B Association for a long time. We lost the Junior C franchise, and then we went from being beggars to being choosers, and in a very tight turnaround we had to create rules of reference and proposals and bid packages for 2 very determined and hardworking franchise proposals. So I thank both proponents for all the hard work and effort they put into this. It's a labor of love, and I know that you've done it for really the best interest of our community. Last time we spoke about this, I expressed my frustration with the OHA and the leagues for the way in this we were being put into a corner. And at the end of the day, I appreciate that the business proposal is a very critical part of this puzzle. We wanted to make sure that we have a franchise that is not looking 5 years from now asking us for a handout to keep the lead team going. And I think both proponents met that bar. The ultimate decision for me has really come down to a risk assessment. The decision today doesn't decide what team goes on the ice in September, if we're lucky enough. There are still risks and hurdles and threats that have to be navigated, particularly for one of the proponents, and that's the Junior B League. And it makes it very difficult for us to make a decision based on the business case and what we think is the best fit when we know ultimately the team that we picked could not hit the ice because of the encroachment issue and because of the moratorium issue. And today we received a letter from Tom Strouch to Director Culver dealing with the fact that there have been 3 objections raised to the Junior B application, one of which is in a 50-kilometer radius that tricks the switch, and that's in fact what killed our Junior C program. So at the end of the day, I will be supporting the Junior A option because I'm very concerned that the Junior B franchise, as well-intentioned and solid as they are in their proponent, they can't get to the ice because of these hurdles that, regardless of our decision, could prevent them from reaching the ice this fall. With that, I'll go to Councillor Madigan for the last.
Thank you very much, Mayor Saunderson. Lots been said, so I don't need to echo it. It was used by one of the proponents. I received an email saying that we are choosing to use their words, who we would like to ethically represent our community. And I've never thought about it that way. I said at the committee level, this isn't Junior A versus Junior B. This is putting a team on the ice that everybody has said this evening will be celebrating their 10th and 15th year here. If I just, obviously I'm going to support the Junior A, so I don't need to say why. But the Junior B, this is what frustrated me about the league, not the proponents. So I thank former Mayor Terry Geddes. He did a wonderful job to get this community excited once again. But the Go JHL, in an effort to expand, perhaps maybe got ahead of themselves and was too ambitious and certain about how the expansion could happen. The Junior B group, I feel, were made a victim of the Go, underestimating the issues in the way of that expansion. And unfortunately, the OHA really didn't act in the way of a parent organization should and stop this competition before it even began happening, and correcting the Go's enthusiasm and aggressive pressing for expansion right now. It's a shame that the OHA didn't really let them know that all the hurdles and make them aware of everything. So no matter what, we have 2 organizations. As I said, former Mayor Terry Geddes said at the onset of his presentation, no matter what team we choose, both organizations are going to work together to make the team in Collingwood the absolute best team that we possibly can have. And I'm excited for the 2019-2020 season here at the Eddie Bush. Thank you very much.
That I'll look to the clerk to call the recorded vote, please.
Certainly recorded. Vote has been requested. All those in favor of the motion, please rise. Thank you. You may be seated. Motion is carried unanimous.
All right, we will then go back to the normal course of the agenda. So I'll look to the Strategic Initiative Standing Committee meeting items from February 11th of 2019 and the staff report. So first up is item 10.1.1, the organizational realignment. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. Moved by me, seconded by Councillor Comey. Be it resolved that staff report CAO 2019-01 be received and council approve the proposed organizational realignments as presented and defer the financial considerations to the 2019 budget deliberations.
We had a very thorough presentation at the SIC meeting, so I don't know that we need to ask the CAO to take us through that again. Are there any questions, council, before I call the vote? I did have one quick question for the CAO, and that is just to confirm that the $500,000 anticipated cost, that is actually incorporated into our current budget.
Thank you. Yes, that is correct.
All right. That being said, unless there's any other questions, I'm going to call the vote. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. Deputy Mayor, what's next?
My apologies.
It's okay. I see in-camera stuff.
Moved by me, seconded by Councillor Comey. Be it resolved that staff report C 2019-04 be received and council enact and pass a bylaw to amend procedural bylaw 2019-006 to include the policy recommendations contained herein with respect to the recording of in-camera meetings, which include that the recordings be stored on an encrypted electronic device separate from the town servers, to be located in a town vault with the official council minutes in a locked box. Restricted and controlled access by the clerk or deputy clerk ensures that only those privileged to view or listen to the in-camera meetings recordings is able to do so. and that the audio and or video recordings of in-camera meetings to be retained for a period of 6 months.
Questions, comments, council? Councilor Berman.
Thank you. I had a couple of quick ones, Mayor Saunderson, but one was to the CAO who just left, but I might not need him here. When we addressed this last, I think it was February 11th, he had given a best guess that the any recommendations coming from the judicial inquiry were going to be early fall. And I had a couple quick questions based on that not changing. If I may.
Can't hear you.
Is that better? Thank you. Thanks, Matt. So through you to the clerk, if I may, assuming that the report is passed tonight, when does the clock on the 6 months start? Is it from the first meeting that we recorded or from tonight?
Clerk Thomas?
Certainly, it would be through your worship to Councilor Berman. It would be our intention that as of council's effective date of having the recorded in-camera minutes, that it would be from that time frame. The earliest recording would happen from them.
January 14th, if I recall. So based on that, what would be the date that the January 14th that the recordings would be due to be erased or destroyed? What would 6 months? I can't do that on my computer. Be from
late June? Would be late June. June or late June.
Okay. Okay, other than that, just I'll still be opposed to this, but can I get a recorded vote on that?
Just for clarification, the motion I'm looking at has a blank timeline. Are we looking to have somebody insert that? Yes. So right now, Councilor Berman, there's no timeline inserted in the motion. Oh, sorry, recommendation 6 months. Okay, my mistake. Any other comments or questions? Councilor Doherty.
Thank you, Worship, and through you to the clerk. I know we discussed at length the notion of 6 months, but I keep thinking about the fact that the period before, or the period within which an inquiry about the happenings of an in-camera meeting can be up to 6 years. What is our rationale for recommending 6 months?
Thomas?
Certainly, through your worship to members of council, just to provide some clarity too, I was advised to go back and confirm the timelines. So the public is aware there is no time limit for a closed meeting investigation. And so that was the concern, was to take a look at what was the different accountability time limit mechanisms. So the one regarding our code of conduct is 6 months. There isn't one for a closed meeting investigator, but we had consulted with our closed meeting investigator, and they indicated that they were supportive of the Miller-Thompson legal opinion that it's not a best practice for parliamentary purposes for the recording of in-camera meetings, regardless that it was recommended through the Ombudsman's office and I believe the IPC office. However, they provided that if council wanted to have a greater retention than the 6 months, that they could utilize the 6 years as a time frame, because that's consistent with the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act.
6 years came from, thank you.
Councilor McLeod.
I have a question through you, your worship, regarding how we're going to do this, because I feel as though we are going to be getting some direction from a judge on some of these issues in the next several months, and I would prefer that we not how do I put this? That we not end up with egg on our faces, having destroyed some of our own in-camera recordings, and then hear from a judge and recommendations of a judicial inquiry that we ought to be keeping them in perpetuity. And so I wonder if there's a way to make an amendment to this motion that we hold on to everything until such time as the recommendations from the judicial inquiry come down, and revisit at that time. Is that possible?
Yes, and you can put that motion. You can move that motion, and if you need assistance. It'd be amendment, sorry. Well, an amendment, we would vote on the amendment, and then if amendment passes, then it would affect the main motion. Right now, the recommendation that's on the table is the 6 months, And if you wanted to change that to a year and then review after the recommendations have been received, then that certainly could be an amendment to go on the floor now, and it would be considered before the main motion.
I would like to put that amendment on the motion, or
Okay.
on the floor right now.
Councillor Madigan, you had your hand up, is that the seconded?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I think the amendment, well,
So my thought is that we hold on to the recordings currently created and in our possession until such time as we receive direction from the judicial inquiry regarding best practices. If that is indeed something that the judicial inquiry does, and then at that point, we can revisit this issue and then decide whether it's 6 months, 6 years, or perpetuity.
there's typing.
Certainly, through your worship, to Councillor MacLeod and Councillor Madigan, I'm wondering, as the motion that's on the floor is a motion to carry on with the 6 months, if the amendment is something different, then we'd have to vote on the motion and then put forward a different retention schedule. However, if an appropriate amendment could be that the in-camera meetings be retained for a period of 6 months, subject to any further recommendations from the judicial inquiry, regardless that all records be maintained, I should say, be retained until that time.
Until such time as the judicial inquiry recommendations are made public?
Right.
I would be satisfied with that.
And we would not destroy any records.
With the proviso that nothing be destroyed.
Right, so if the judicial inquiry makes a recommendation regarding the recording of in-camera minutes, then we would come forward immediately and have direction from council on an appropriate time period.
And if there, sorry, through your worship,
Yes.
and if there were no recommendations made regarding those sorts of issues by the judicial inquiry, we would go to 6 months based on the decisions taken today. Are you still willing to second that?
Can I have your comment then?
Councilor
I have a little bit of concern because we don't know the timeline of how long the judicial inquiry is gonna go, and I think if we had these put into place before, we probably wouldn't be having a judicial inquiry, so I would like to stick with the original amendment of a year. That I think gives them enough time to come to the conclusions that we can vote on at that point. This is, right now is the only time that we can win as a council, so we might as well do it from the start and not look at it again. And I don't think another 6 months is that long. I don't think, it's not like it's open-ended.
All right, so based on the comments I'm understanding from the clerk, the way to get to that is to defeat the one that's on the table first. And then we can come back and talk about the timeline, and you could then move the motion for the year. Okay? Yes. So, you want, okay. So I will get to Councillor Hamlin. You had a comment?
Oh, I had heard the motion being submitted by Councillor MacLeod, and I know it was originally seconded by Councillor Madigan, but I could tell by his remarks he was withdrawing his being a seconder of that motion. So I was wondering how I might achieve being the person who seconded her original motion, and I think it was the one that Clerk Almas read.
Right, and my understanding was that Councillor MacLeod wasn't comfortable with that wording defaulting back to the 6 months, so you were looking at a change. Am I right in that?
My goal, Your Worship, is to not make any permanent decisions until such time as we know what the judicial inquiry has to say regarding these issues.
So I guess let's do this. Let's break this motion into 2 parts, because the first part is just that the recordings being stored on an encrypted device in a secure locked box. So why don't we get that one out of the way, and then we'll deal with the timeline. So any comments on encrypting and storing in a locked box? Sounds very clandestine. So no comments then, I will call a vote. All in favor? And that appears to be carried unanimously. Then dealing with the second aspect, what the recommendation is currently on the table is that they would retain these for 6 months. And I know, based on the discussions, there seems to be a concern, and what I understand from Councillor McLeod is that you're really hesitant to fix a date until we've got the recommendations of the judicial inquiry, or in the case that the judicial inquiry doesn't make a recommendation, it will have to come back to council in any event. So then I'm gonna look to the clerk for suggestions then about how we can carry the encrypted minutes beyond the report from the inquiry and deal with it in the wake of the inquiry's recommendations or no recommendations. I've got you. I'll get you.
Certainly, so the original motion that was read out has the period of 6 months. So this motion can be amended if there's an amendment to it, similar to the subject to the findings of the judicial inquiry. However, if there's no amendment, this motion should be voted on defeated, and then a new motion put forward that is being suggested by Councillor McLeod.
Okay. Deputy Mayor, you had a comment?
I was just going to float the idea of an and/or, so you have a date with the and/or of the completion of the inquiry.
Right, but I think we're looking for the open timeline. It's the 6 month, the fixed period, I think is still a problem.
Sorry, I should have prefaced it by saying my rationale for killing the 6 months would be that someone would put on the table an and/or.
Okay, so then let's deal with the 6 months. And that was initially put on the table, sorry, by the original motion by the Deputy Mayor and Councillor Cohn. So we will call then the motion, now we are voting on the second aspect, which is that the audio and or video recordings of an in-camera meeting be retained for a period of 6 months. I was just gonna call the vote.
I was just gonna ask for a recorded vote.
Okay, recorded vote on the pass.
A recorded vote has been requested. All those in favor of the motion, please rise. Thank you. Motion's defeated. Sorry, all those opposed, please rise. I was saving you a step there. Thank you, may be seated. The motion is defeated.
All right, so the floor then is open for a new motion for the timeline of retention.
Through you, Your Worship, if the clerk could read back what I suggested earlier, that would be great.
Certainly, to Councillor McLeod, I propose that the audio and or video recordings, the meetings be retained for a period of 1 year or until the findings from the judicial inquiry have been received. Would you agree to the 1 year? Was that?
I'm through you, Your Worship. I'm cool with the year. It's not about the year, it's about the judicial inquiry for me. I think that
we can leave it quite simply as until the findings of the judicial inquiry.
At which point we get to have a new discussion.
Right. Yes.
I think that would be great.
Councillor Hannigan, you second that one?
Yeah, thank you so much through you, but I believe Deputy Mayor Hall really just said and or that adding those two words is actually fantastic because it's either we wait or when it's done we deal with it. So thank you very much for simplifying it, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I think we're getting caught up on something that we want to wait till we get the information and then we can make it better. So
We have to revisit one way, because if we get a recommendation, we'll do it in light of, if there's no recommendation, we still have to come back. So what we're saying is, we're keeping these things until the conclusion of the judicial inquiry and it will come back to council.
Right.
No, my understanding is that the time period will be determined once we do or don't get recommendations.
Mayor Saunderson has captured my feelings.
Seconded by Councillor Madigan. Berman, would you like a recorded vote?
Certainly, through your worship, members of council, a recorded vote has been requested. All those in favor, please rise. Thank you. You may be seated. Motion is carried unanimous.
All right, Deputy Mayor, we are at.
This is the bylaw.
Oh, the bylaw, good.
So the bylaw will reflect that all records should be retained until the inquiry.
Okay. So moved by me, seconded by Councillor Comey, be it resolved that bylaw number 2019-013, being a bylaw to add provisions to the recording of in-camera sessions to procedural bylaw number 2019-006, be enacted and passed this 11th day of March 2019.
Thank you. We hammered our way through that one. Are there any questions or comments on the bylaw? I don't see any, so I'm going to call a vote. All in favor? That's carried unanimously. Staff report HR 2019-2.
Moved by me, seconded by Councillor Comey, be it resolved that staff report HR 2019-02 be received and council approve policies D-21, council staff relations, and E-13, council parental leave as presented.
Council, any questions or comments before I call the vote? Councillor Berman.
Sorry about that. I have some questions about the parental leave part.
Yes.
To Melissa, if I could.
Yep.
I think they're all yes and no questions. The original 20-week recommendation, that came from the province?
Through your worship, that's correct.
And that would have been all municipalities?
That's correct, that's what's set out, the minimum set out in the act.
And this section, just confirming what I think I already know, it only applies to right now to the 9 members that are currently on council. Another council could change it to whatever they see fit.
That's correct.
And the 20 or 26 week period, that relates to consecutive weeks. So if after X number of weeks, a member is able to make it to 1 meeting, does the clock restart then on the 20 to 26?
Through your worship, it would be 1 period, but throughout that period, a council member is free to attend a meeting without terminating that leave.
Okay, and you answered my other one, that the period can be changed by a new council if they see fit. Okay, thank you.
Would it make sense to separate these out, just to deal with them separately, I think? We'll start off with the staff relations and then deal with the parental leave. Are there any questions or comments on the staff relations policy? Councillor McLeod.
Through you, your worship, although I'm not sure to whom. My question is about a phrase that I read in that policy, and since we're dealing with and/ors, I have a question regarding shalls and wills. And the wording is, I remember it, I've written it down here somewhere, there we go. Councillors will make appointments to discuss issues with staff. And my question is, are we committing ourselves to only meeting with staff by appointment?
I will ask clerk. Looks to me like a will requires the meeting to be scheduled, yes. Were you proposing an alternate?
Yes. Well, I would propose that we remove the word will and perhaps replace it with where possible. I think there are sometimes occasions where chance meetings in hallways can turn into very productive discussions, and I don't know that I want to be, that I or my fellow council members would want to be constrained to having meetings that are reduced to only being allowed when there's a will.
And you could just point us to which item you're at.
It was 5.3b.
So I guess that maybe then begs the question, and I will look to staff for clarification, but if you meet somebody in the hall and you start a meeting, presumably, I mean, that's a spontaneous scheduling. So I don't know if it falls within the ambit. I think the upshot of, as I read it, is just to make sure that the meetings are essentially consensual and been scheduled. And So does that preclude a spontaneous meeting, I guess is the question.
Sorry, again, this is the HR,
Yeah, sorry, unless I should be asking this, I apologize. Okay.
That's okay, through you, your worship. The second part of that sentence, really is the intent. So appointments will be made for meetings between staff and members of council to ensure all parties are available and prepared for the discussion. So that's more to give people advance notice that certain topic will be discussed and that both parties have time to prepare. It wasn't to preempt a chance meeting in the hallway. That was more to allow people time to prepare for discussions to make efficient use of time.
Thank you. My comment regarding that is that I get concerned about the law of unintended consequences. And wills and shalls make me concerned, but having raised it, asked and answered, I guess we're okay. Thank you.
Okay, so we're getting a comment here, a suggestion, because number 3 says guidelines for respectful working relationships. And I guess to look at the particular item, I don't know if you want to make a suggestion, Sarah?
certainly through your worship, members of council, I can understand the concern and how that's worded. However, number 3 is preferenced as a guideline for respectful working relationships. So I don't know if there maybe should be some flexibility understanding the word guidelines, or if council thinks that where it says appointments will be made for meetings, it will should be changed to between the language, but I'll refer to the CAO.
You're on one, 2, down 3. I mean, will where time permits, I mean, you need a qualifier in there.
Through your worship, I don't think this precludes or preempts meeting with members of council on an ad hoc or spontaneous basis. I mean, this is the best practice, but I for sure will make myself available for those meetings, and I think most of my staff will as well. So the intention here is to try and codify some guidelines around these meetings, but it doesn't preempt any spontaneous or ad hoc meetings.
Okay.
Thank you, your worship, I'm mollified.
Okay. Listen, my apologies for going around you.
Thank you.
It's very well drafted. So then, unless there's any other comments on the staff council relations, I'm gonna call the vote on that item first. Seeing none then, all in favor of approving the staff council policy, and that is approved unanimously. Now breaking out the second one with the parental leave. Are there any questions or comments before I call the vote on that? All right, now I'm going to call the vote. All in favor of the parental leave policy, raise your hands. Disorderly, opposed? Noted. Okay, Deputy Mayor, I think the next up then is the water supply agreement.
Yes, thank you. This is moved by me, seconded by Councillor Doherty. Be it resolved that staff report PW 2019-04 be received and council authorize the mayor and clerk to execute the term sheet attached as in Appendix A. And further, that staff and the council is to be directed to work with the Corporation of the Town of New Tecumseh to negotiate and prepare the formal agreement for the upgrade and expansion of the water treatment plant.
I'll look to the CAO, give some background on this and any further developments since we got it at the SIC. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. So there has been a fair bit of discussion online and offline about this proposed term sheet. So I thought I should perhaps provide a bit of a context so council can make some choices around whether or not it wishes to proceed with the term sheet as drafted or wishes to make amendments to the sheets as recommended by staff. So the term sheet as we've recommended builds on the 2016 principles that was approved by council. So the agreement in there feeds off that document, and I think that document was part of the initial staff report that was presented to council. Nothing in this agreement detracts from the town's ownership of the plant,
of the pumping stations or the transmission line. This is not a divestment. The town will continue to maintain its ability to supply and regulate water within its boundaries. So nothing in this agreement will take away from the town's autonomy to be able to provide clean water to its residents and businesses. The agreement, I think, provides certainty and predictability, both to the town of Collingwood as well as the town of New Tecumseh. As many of you are aware, we don't have any fundamental basis upon which we can regulate that relationship from a cost perspective. So if the plant is proposed to be expanded to supply water based on growth needs within our own municipality as well as New Tecumseh, there is no basis upon which we can use to calculate what each municipality has to pay. This agreement codifies that and provides a greater degree of certainty both to us as well as the township of New Tecumseh. So we've got some clearly worded agreement that spells out who pays for what and what triggers those payments. This agreement has to be, in my view, in the public interest. The water treatment plant that we have is what I would describe as a sub-regional entity. It is located in Collingwood, but it does provide and was intended to provide water to supply New Tecumseh as well. The growth needs of New Tecumseh has been taken into consideration, as well as the growth needs of the town of Collingwood. We're not proposing here to give up or somehow compromise any of the ownership or interest that we have in the plant. So I just want to make that point clear. There has been different iterations of this agreement, and the attempt made in the last year or so has been to try and put it in a framework that is predictable and provide some certainty to both us and the town of New Tecumseh. This is also not without precedence, I should say. There are a lot of municipalities that have intermunicipal agreement, and I think from an environmental and economic point of view, this makes sense, that municipality that has excess capacity or ability to generate excess capacity can enter into an agreement with its neighbors to provide water or anything else. So we think this agreement is in the public interest. It does provide us with the certainty that we need. It does protect our ability to regulate how much water we provide to ourselves and neighboring municipality. The water is being provided on a cost recovery basis, so this is not intended to be a profit center. And the 18.5% interest in the transmission, in the pipeline, is based on the evaluation that was done a couple of years ago by, I think it was Watson, Brian?
That's correct.
Council, questions or comments? Councillor Madigan.
Thank you very much, Mayor Saunderson, through you to the CAO. Just for the public, you had mentioned cost recovery. Who chooses what the fee will be? These are some of the questions. My following questions are what I've been asked by the public. So is it set by us as the owner?
The town of Collingwood decides, yes.
Excellent. So it's more than cost recovery because we evaluate what it is. Secondly, if I can, does this agreement protect us, the town of Collingwood, and its taxpayers from the bulk water sales that could eventually be done by New Tecumseh?
There is no provision in the agreement to allow New Tecumseh to sell water on a bulk basis. There's nothing in this agreement that allows them to do that.
That allows, so it does protect. So when this pipeline was built, it was built as an economic driver for New Tech by the Ontario government.
Aqua funded the plant, yes.
So following up to that, I never like to use these terms, but because of the funding, I think it was over $40 million. Arguably, we can't say no to giving them water because it was built specifically for that task, not for anything else, to be an economic driver in Ontario with the Honda plant. Is that correct?
Through your worship, yes, that is correct.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, through you to the CAO. I'm generally in support of the terms. However, in the original agreement, there was very clear direction as to where the water could be sold geographically, so i.e. that it must stay within the Nottawasaga watershed. Also that it could only be sold to a municipality, it could not be sold to a private interest for the purposes of selling water at a profit. And so I would like to see those terms from the original agreement brought into this agreement as well. And they may be there, but I don't see them here.
Through your worship, yeah, if it is the will of council to ensure that there's provision in there to restrict the sale to the NVCA watershed, I mean, that provision can be put in there. If we put any provision regarding the sale to a non-municipal entity, we need to make sure that we're not capturing any of the large manufacturing facility in that definition. So we've got to make sure that we don't, by default, negate them providing water to some of these large consumers.
Councillor Doherty.
Perhaps we can do that by incorporating the word "not to be resold." Maybe provided to a private entity under certain circumstances and subject to the approval of the town, but not to be resold.
Through your worship, yeah, we can look at wording to that effect, just to make sure that we're not sort of by default capturing having unintended consequences. But
Yes.
that's something that
Thank
we
you.
could put forward as well.
Councillor Hammond.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to start by saying that I'm in support of the this project moving forward and us solidifying the agreement that we've had with new terms that, as I understand from CAO Min, will help solidify the framework and codify how we move forward with our partner in this water scheme. I also wanted to say I very much appreciate the work that staff has done on this over the last year. I can see a lot of thought and hard work's gone into this. My comments this evening are more directed to items that are not specifically addressed in the term sheet that we have before us. We have a draft term sheet which in a broad brush way sets out the way in which staff would like to move forward to negotiate this agreement. And I put my comments forward knowing that maybe some of them are implied in here, but because this is such a broad brush, maybe they're just not here. I know that some of them have been addressed specifically by CAO and Min this evening, and I do appreciate that. So with that in mind, I also would like to say that I spoke briefly to Clerk Almas today, and she suggested that I deal with each of my 7 points separately for as motions to be considered by council. And lastly, before I get into the 7 items, I wanted to mention that if council was agreeable with any of these items, that I would hope that we would see a revised terms come forward from staff at a future meeting. I don't pretend to know where any of these particular items should fit into the draft comments. So with that in mind, if I could start. So,
I'm sorry, I'm going
yes.
to cut you off, Councillor Hammond, because I want everyone to get an opportunity to comment on the
Yes.
agreement before we start going into the interview, and we have these in front of us. The clerk printed them up for us, and I'm just going to turn to the clerk for then clarification on how best, once we've got all the comments, we would deal with these individual motions, because they, just based on our last discussion here about when you have a motion to amend versus a new motion, are we starting from scratch, or are we dealing with each of these as a motion to amend? How are we going to approach this?
certainly through your worship to Councillor Hamlin, I'm wondering, during your preface there, your comments, you indicated that these are somewhat in addition to the terms that are currently prepared. Without comparing the two documents, are any of these contradictory? Because there could be an opportunity to approve what's been presented and make motions to add to the terms.
I think I would like to leave that to staff to advise.
Just to clarify, sorry, you would leave it to staff to advise how we're
Well,
gonna
I don't
proceed on
know,
the?
I don't know whether some of these, like, I would say none of what I'm bringing forward are mentioned specifically in the draft terms that are before us. I was trying to say in my introductory remarks, maybe they're implied, maybe staff's been thinking about them, but I want, my intention would be to make sure that if council was to be in agreement with me, that they do become part explicitly of the terms.
And so I think that what we're trying to get a grip here, or understanding, Councillor Hamlin, is if these are all things that are in addition to, and you support the existing terms of reference, subject to discussion or votes about each of these items that are in addition to, would it make sense to start off then and have our vote on the initial motion and then to deal with these 7 points as potential additions for staff to take into consideration and add to the existing terms of reference?
I think that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then we'll do it that way. But before we do, I call a vote on the main motion. I just wanted to get some clarification because I'm very concerned about this 18.5% interest and how it came into being. I understand it came into being in the 1999 agreement because we didn't get paid initially under the 97 agreement. And so it was sort of this ad hoc way to give us an interest. With that said, we know that there's about a $40 million debt owing on this pipeline. And although we've had discussions in the past that this 18.5% is supposed to be an asset only with no liability, I'm concerned that that's not the case because I don't think that's written anywhere in any of the previous agreements. So I'm just was hoping for some clarification from either Brian or the CAO on, does this 18.5% interest attach with a liability?
Through your worship and Director McDonald will comment after I've said my piece. I think it will be difficult to say that the interest doesn't come with any liability, because if you have an interest in an entity, there's got to be some residual liability that you would share. So we can argue that our obligation ends at our political boundary, but I would suggest that there's got to be some liability associated with that interest that we have in the linear asset.
Okay, and then that actually just segues right into my next question, because my understanding is Collingwood was going, as the owner of the R.A. Barker facility, was going to purify and transport that water, and our responsibility and liability ended at the Poplar Side Road and the pumping station. And we know from our obligations under the Safe Water Drinking Act that we as an owner, potentially under this 18.5% interest, and a supplier, if there was to be a crisis or some event in New Tecumseh that arising from the water quality, are we as a town and we around this table exposed to liability because we have an 18.5% interest in this pipeline? And I guess that's a legal question, but based on the answer I'm hearing from the CAO, is I think a very real possibility. And I guess finally, in terms of valuation on this 18.5% interest, this is infrastructure. It's not real estate. The land was sold to the county by the previous council, and so right now the pipeline's under the ground on an easement that I understand hasn't been registered. But I guess what my concern is on the valuation, and I know there's some concern about the timing of the valuation. It's a depreciating asset. And again, if we have an 18.5% interest, are we all of a sudden now under an obligation to be making asset management plan arrangements for that 18.5% liability? So to me, this 18.5% interest that we were given as a placeholder for a payment that couldn't be made at the outset it poses a great deal of risk, and to me, I don't see this as a divestment of an asset. I see this as us actually getting paid what we ought to have been paid before, and those funds would be applied, and I gather, and I'll look for confirmation from Director McDonald, would go into the water reserve to offset our ratepayers' costs for the expansion.
That is the intent.
Okay. So, with those comments then, I will call the vote on the adoption of the terms of reference, subject, we know, to Councillor Hamlin bringing her additions as set out in the papers in front of us. So all in favor? That is carried unanimously. Now, Councillor Hamlin, I'll hand this over to you to deal with your amendments or your additions.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The first one, so I'll read it as an amendment and then look for a seconder just to clarify the procedure. And then can I then speak to it?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So the first one would be that the term sheet include a reference that a lawyer with specific expertise in infrastructure agreements be retained by the town to ensure Collingwood obtains appropriate and expert advice in this specialized and complex area of law. So I would move that be added.
Is there a second? Councillor McLeod? Questions or comments, Council? You can go ahead, Councillor Hamlin.
Okay, thank you. So my comment here isn't to cast any doubt on any advice we may have received to date, because I haven't been privy to that, and I don't know the background even of a lawyer who would have been giving the advice. But I do know that infrastructure is a complicated topic, and that there are lawyers who specialize in this. And I read through the staff report, and on numerous occasions there was reference to the agreements, being disputed because the terms weren't clear. And I just would like, as a town, that we make sure that we include everything in this agreement that we should be as a town doing this. And so we're not left 5 years from now or 50 years from now thinking, oh, wish we had retained that kind of expertise so we'd have a great agreement. So that's the purpose behind my amendment.
Yeah, I'm going to look to the CAO just to give implications in terms of the procedure.
Thank you, Roger. So just a couple of comments. We did consult with Miller Thompson, who is our vendor of record, and they did assure us that they've got the requisite expertise. I mean, Steve Romelia and Jean Leonard have dealt with similar agreements for other municipalities, so they've got the requisite expertise in-house to be able to provide us with the advice that we need, and we did actually pre-consult with them. Secondly, if it is the will of council for us to go to another lawyer, we'll have to go through a procurement process, so I suspect that will significantly delay the progress of this agreement. So we'll have to go and do an RFO and get another company or firm or individual to bid on that. And my own experience would be that if we were to go that route, given the value of this contract, I'm not sure what kind of bids you might get from people who specialize in quote-unquote infrastructure agreements.
Any questions or comments, Council? Councillor Coleman.
Yes, thank you. Through your worship to CAO, and could you clarify, was that a similar process undertaken, let's say, with the airport then, and seeking that type of consultation and expert input? Was that a similar process used?
Well, through your worship, the lawyer we use in the airport transaction is our vendor of record. And just to supplement that as well, there are instances where the particular lawyer on the file didn't have the expertise, but others in the firm had that expertise. So she brought those other lawyers to bear on the initiative. And that's why we go with that company, because they can draw on their expertise outside of the individual lawyer who is allocated to this file.
Thank you.
Could I have a question of CAO amendment?
Councillor Hamlin.
Thank you. So I did look at the website for Miller Thompson in the last week or so, and the only experts I could see in infrastructure were litigation lawyers. We're litigation lawyers in Woodbridge. So I just wanted to just clarify the information you gave us a few minutes ago. That you, I just wanted to make sure I understood what you said, that Miller Thompson assured you that these two lawyers had done agreements with respect to infrastructure.
That's correct.
Well, I have no information to argue with that at this point.
All right, and then I will call the vote on the amendment number 1, as set out on the papers in front of us. All those in favor? Opposed? That is defeated. Number 2.
Thank you. My second amendment would be that the term sheet clearly state this is not a divestment by the town of Collingwood. That would be my motion.
And if I can just ask for clarity, because I know going down to number 5, we're talking about the sale of an 18.5% interest, and I know it might be semantics, but when you're talking about divestment, maybe you can just be a little more clear.
Yes, this is with respect to the pipeline, pardon me, the, I don't know what we call that, the plant?
The RA Baker treatment plant?
Yes.
Yes. So what you're trying to get to there, and correct, is that this is really just a capacity. It's not a purchase of a share in the plant.
That's it.
Okay. And, yeah, seconder for that. Councillor Doherty. I'll look to the CAO. I mean, I think if that's absolutely clear in the agreement. I know there was an acknowledgement that they don't have an interest, but certainly I think that makes absolute sense if it's not already included.
Through your worship, I would rather us perhaps change the wording or amend the wording to say that all we're doing in this agreement is addressing capacity, not the plant. I mean, I think the agreement speaks to capacity and the allocation of capacity, and I think it's probably easier for us to insert a provision in there that says this is about capacity rather than talking about the water treatment plant itself.
Does that assist, Councillor Hanlon?
Yes, I would be wondering what those words would be.
Yeah.
Well, through your worship, we could have something in the agreement. I think the agreement that, or the term sheet that we have proposed only speaks to capacity and the allocation of capacity and the payment of capacity. We could put something either in the preamble or in the term sheet itself that reinforces that this is about capacity. So we could add words alongside the current language that deals with capacity to indicate that this is what this agreement is about. It's not about the physical plant or the pumping station or the transmission.
Oh, I'd be happy with that.
Okay. Councillor Doherty.
Thank you. And through you to the CAO, and I apologize, I probably should have brought this up earlier, and I thought we were going to be dealing with it, but there is a sentence within term number 6 that states, and I quote, once built, additional new capacity will form part of the plant owned by Collingwood, and New Tecumseth will be the owner of the additional capacity purchased under the agreement. To me, that language, at least to me, could be interpreted as owning additional capacity, meaning physical capacity, meaning a portion of the plant, which would then relate to what we're discussing here.
So through your worship, the intention here is not to deal with the actual physical asset itself.
Yes, I know that.
So we could add language in there to clarify that this is about capacity. So I think I get the theme of the discussion, that this is about capacity and the allocation and purchasing of capacity rather than physical the portion of the plant, I guess is what I think is we're trying to safeguard against. So I think we can take that that notion under advisement, and in our communication with our lawyers, suggest to them that the agreement be clear that this is about capacity and the allocation of such, not physical assets.
Thank you.
And I think just to follow that up on page 1, numbers 1 and 2, infrastructure and capacity. Number 1 says Collingwood owns the plant and all facilities related to the treatment of raw water, pumping equipment, and the transmission main within the town of Collingwood's boundaries. 2, capacity. New Tecumseh would like to purchase an additional 27.5 megaliters of capacity for a total of 33.5. So I think there's some comfort in there, and the wordsmithing will need to be done. But in any event, I mean, I think Councillor Hamlin's clarification that this is a capacity issue and not a divestment in terms of capital or plant facilities is consistent, and so I'll call the vote on it unless there's any other comments. Sorry, did you have your hand up, Councillor?
I just hadn't highlighted.
Okay.
Yeah, number 1, Collingwood owns the infrastructure and all the facilities related to it.
Which part where?
Sorry, just for clarification through your worship to Councillor Hammond, the original amendment was to state that it's not a divestment by the town of Collingwood, and through conversations with the CAO about the recommendation that it be rather worded, that the term sheet be amended to clearly state that this agreement addresses capacity rather than the facility itself. Is that wording, the wording you're putting forward?
Yes.
So unless there's any further comments, I'm going to call the vote on the amended wording as the clerk just read us. So all in favor? That one is carried unanimously. Number 3.
The third amendment, Your Worship, would be the following. The term sheet to clearly state that nothing in the agreement operates to prevent Collingwood from making decisions independently of New Tecumseh in regard to the supply of water now or in the future for needs as determined by Collingwood within its sole discretion.
So if I can just get clarification, do you mean the water that is within Collingwood's capacity, or are you talking about water that would be within New Tecumseh's capacity?
I'm saying independently of I'll explain my concern to you, and then you can see if I've stated this correctly. My concern is that as I read the terms proposed, any future expansions to the plant, we have to both agree, both municipalities would have to agree. Any major maintenance, both municipalities would have to agree, and so on. And I wanted to make sure that we didn't need New Tecumseh's permission should we decide that we needed water for other, just independently of what we're doing with them. If there's another part of our community we want to service, or if we expand our boundaries, that's particularly what's on my mind. If we were to expand our boundaries in the future and say there's a new area that we want to service, I just felt it wouldn't be what we would want to have contemplated, that we'd have to get their permission. It should be within our peer review as a town of Collingwood if we needed to do further expansions or whatever we wanted to do with our plant.
Okay, I think that goes maybe to the cost sharing, but I'm going to ask the CAO, either Brian or the CAO to respond.
Certainly there are clauses within the term sheet that contemplate that both parties have discussions with respect to expansion or maintenance. Those are not to be unreasonably withheld. The intent there is that so both parties are aware of the plans to expand, so that we don't arbitrarily do an expansion without their knowledge, and that's the intent.
Thank you, Your Worship. The other provision is that there is a governance provision in the term sheet that sets out the framework within which New Tecumseh and the town of Collingwood will administer the agreement, and I think there's enough latitude in there to ensure that our decisions are not preempted or we're not prejudiced by anything that New Tecumseh might say. I mean, I think the other point I would make as well is that the expansion and co-funding of that expansion might require mutual consent. And as the director said, we need to be aware of what our expectations are so we can size the plan accordingly. But it would be pretty difficult for New Tecumseh to tell us not to do anything related to the plant that we owned, and especially if that water has to do with the distribution to our residents and the capacity that we currently have.
Thank you for those thoughts. Where I'm coming from on this is, for example, in paragraph number 6, it talks about Collingwood and New Tecumseh will jointly determine whether expansion of the plant capacity is required into the future. And I realize that, of course, if we don't agree, there's going to be arbitration provisions and there'll be some negotiation that goes on. But this agreement, as I understand it, is described as a permanent agreement that will go on in perpetuity. So my addition here is not with respect to what we're doing tomorrow and the capacity in this agreement that's being negotiated. But I want to make sure that we've left ourselves open in the future, and maybe it's 30 years from now, that we don't have to go cap in hand and be facing an arbitration discussion to New Tecumseh because we need to service some new area of the town.
Thank you, Your Worship. I mean, the only point I would make is that there's got to be I should preface my comments by saying that obviously our primary interest and my primary interest is to ensure that the corporation of the town of Collingwood is protected in this agreement, and that this agreement is fair for us, and it is an agreement that provides us with the certainty and predictability we need. Having said that, I think this agreement has to also be fair to New Tecumseh, and the provisions that we put in place, there might be some need for reciprocity, and that is something that I think we probably have to discuss with the New Tecumseh as well, because they have agreed in principle to some of the provisions in this agreement, and if there is going to be decisions that is made unilaterally, that would have to be fair to us and fair to the town of New Tecumseh.
My last comment is I just wanted to say I appreciate CEO Amin's thoughts on this because I think we all want to reach a fair agreement, and that would be my intent as well.
Okay, we've had a good discussion then, I think, on item 3, so I'm going to call the vote based on what we've heard. So, all in favor of the amendment or addition as proposed in item 3? No, we're down from 2, we're on 3. So all in favor? That is defeated. Number 4, Councillor Hanlon.
Thank you. The terms contemplate the continuation of, obviously, of water that will go through our town to the pipe that's currently owned in part by New Tecumseh and part by Collingwood. So I wanted to put some terms around, so I should just be reading this. The term sheet to include the following with respect to the water leaving Collingwood. 1, no water shall be resold by New Tecumseh outside of the watershed boundaries, and watershed boundaries to be determined with a map. 2, no water shall be resold by New Tecumseh to any person other than municipal government. 3, any water resold by New Tecumseh shall be at a price based upon cost recovery. And 4, if New Tecumseh desires to resell water to a person other than a municipal government, it must obtain the consent of Collingwood, which consent may be unreasonably withheld.
All right. The seconder. Councillor Comey, I'm going to suggest for quickness here that we separate all these 4 out. So the number 1, that no water be resold by New Tech outside the watershed boundaries. I think we've had some discussion on that. So unless there's any further comments, I'm going to call a vote on that one. All in favor? That one is carried unanimously. Number 2, no water shall be resold by New Tecumseh to any person other than municipal government. There has been some discussion of that. I don't know if there's any further comments you would like to add, CAO?
Thank you, Your Worship. The only comment I would make is that I think for this one, if it is a bill of council, I recommend that we, consultation with the lawyer, we make sure that we're not, for some reason, this doesn't result in any unintended consequence. Because, the intention is to sell to New Tecumseh, but New Tecumseh might, through sheer volume, sell to a private entity. So I need to make sure that we're not talking about entities within the municipal boundaries, for example, because this isn't very clear.
And I think Councillor Doré made a comment about resale, water resale, so commercial resale. I don't know if we can incorporate that terminology. Councillor
I think that was the intent of my 4. But what I wanted to say in 2, just to make it clear that they're only going to sell to municipal governments. If I understood CO Amin's comment, if I could just clarify, is what you were saying is if New Tecumseh decided to put a company in between it and the ultimate user, which was the municipality, that wouldn't offend this, and I would agree to that. I think we want to make sure that the ultimate purchaser of any water resold by New Tecumseh is municipal government.
So, are we clear with that? Do you need any words?
But you know what I could do? I don't know. What if it said this? No water shall be resold by New Tecumseh to any end user other than a municipal government. I would be content.
Yeah, through Your Worship. I think that's still ambiguous because I don't understand how that would not affect a resident or a commercial entity. New Tecumseh is selling water to a whole bunch of users within its jurisdiction. This to me it captures those people and prevent the town from selling water to anyone.
Well,
no, I think it's fairly broad.
I think what we're okay. So we can do the wordsmithing here, or we can. I think the intent is clear, but.
So my recommendation would be, through you, Your Worship, that I think the intent and the spirit of what is desired here, I think we can capture, and try and put a provision in there to make it clear that the intention here is not for the town to resell water to a non-municipal entity, and craft it in such a way that it doesn't have the unintended consequences that it could have the way it is written right now.
Yeah, these aren't, just to clarify, I haven't done any kind of legal wordsmithing here. I'm just trying to get the ideas across. So I'm happy with the changes suggested by CAO Amin.
Thank you. Well, the only consideration is if council were to adopt these as they are, then I think it would be a bit of a challenge for us to do the wordsmithing. So I just want to table that there's going to be some wordsmithing, and the wordsmithing should be either deferred to staff and the lawyers, because if council wishes the report to come back to council, then at that time you will see the final language and you can decide whether or not it sort of fulfills the intent of the initial motions.
Yeah, and just finally on that, as I read these draft terms, these aren't final words either. I just want to get the intent into the terms, yeah.
Okay, so you're comfortable we've captured your intent, which is basically that it's not to be sold off to a reseller who's for commercial purposes, as in bottled water. Is that really what we're aiming for here?
Yes.
Okay. So with that said, then I'm going to call Councillor Madigan.
Thank you. Just for clarification, because I think we already answered this. My second question through you to the CAO was does this protect the town from bulk water sales? And his answer was yes. So if this agreement already does this, as per it was my second question, I don't think we need to challenge that.
My original response, through Your Worship, yes, this agreement does not contemplate any bulk sale of water.
Councillor McLeod.
Through you, Your Worship, I think to build on what Councillor Hamlin has been saying, yes, the agreement as placed as the draft terms doesn't address that, and I think that she wants it to be addressed. That it will not be something that we would like to happen. And so, is it possible that we can spell that out? It's not prohibited. Let's prohibit it, I think, is the intent of this.
Yeah, so I mean, I think really we're talking shading here.
Yes.
So if we've got, if we're comfortable it's in the agreement and this says the same thing, it's already in the agreement, then I'd say we just call a vote because we're going in the same direction. So I'm gonna call a vote, all in favor then of number 2, as discussed about the bottled water bottle sales, consumer use. Raise your hand. I'm in favor. So that is carried. Number 3.
Yes, the agreement as written, or these terms that we have before us, don't speak to the price at which New Tecumseh will be selling water to other municipalities, which we know is their current intention. So I am suggesting that we add as a term that any water resold by New Tecumseh to other municipalities shall be at a price based upon cost recovery, which is the same basis upon which we're selling it to the New Tecumseh.
Can I get a seconder for that? Councillor Doherty. And I guess my question is, I'm not sure how we're able to do that. And they're the end user, we're selling it to them, and how we can bind them in their dealings with it, I'm not sure it's possible, but I'll look to the CAO on that.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have those same sentiments. I mean, I think the intention here is for them to do cost recovery, but we can't bind another corporation.
My concern, Mr. Mayor, on this was, it comes from this place that if down the road, and I'm not even saying it's the current council in New Tecumseh, but let's say it's 10 or 15 years down the road and more municipalities are having trouble with their own water supply. Maybe they're getting water from an aquifer and the water's starting to be in short supply, and we're selling it to New Tecumseh at cost, and New Tecumseh is taking matters into their own hand and charging a going market rate that based on supply and demand, which could be considerably more. I guess the question is, do we want New Tecumseh to be making a profit on our water that we would not be sharing in? And I had extensive discussions with CEO Min on this, and I finally came around to the view that he had, which was that this is a public service almost, that between public entities we're providing water to another community, and cost recovery is appropriate. So if it's appropriate for us to be selling it at cost recovery, I wanted to enshrine that it would be appropriate for New Tecumseh to also sell it on that same basis.
Go ahead, CEO.
Through you, I guess I'm agreeing with Councillor Hamlin. The only caution I'm putting in here is that whether or not this is something that we could legitimately do. That's my only caution. I'm not disagreeing. I mean, I think this is a public service and it's a public good, and it should be cost recovery. But my only point is this enforceable? Do we have the capacity to bind another corporation? So that's my only caution. So I'm not disagreeing. I'm just dealing with. I'm trying to temper expectations of council, so that we don't leave thinking that we can do it if indeed we cannot. I mean, obviously, if it is the will of council, we'll discuss it with our lawyers. But my experience has been in previous agreement that it is difficult for one municipality to find another municipality.
Well, if we could deal with that, I took it from what's before us for how we're setting the rates that we're selling to New Tecumseh, that we'll set the rates, but then they get to review and approve it. And I assume that if they don't approve it, it's going off to arbitration, So I just was hoping we could stick in that kind of a clause where we could go to arbitration if we can't agree. But I hear you that we need some advice on this, but I would like to put, I would still like to have my motion dealt with.
All right, yeah, so unless there's further comments, then I will call the vote on that. All in favor of item 3, 4 sub 3.
Or 3, yeah.
Opposed? That is carried. Item 4 sub 4.
So this was the idea of New Tecumseh, if they're reselling their water to a private entity, that it had to obtain the consent of Collingwood. That was my intent with that.
And, okay, my understanding really is we were prohibiting that under item 2, and we didn't really want to entertain any of that. Is that?
That's fine then. I'm happy to withdraw that.
Okay. Item 5.
Thank you. With respect to the sale of Collingwood's 18.5% interest in the pipeline to New Tecumseh, 1, Collingwood to seek independent and current appraisal advice, and number 2, the term sheet to specify that payment will be made at the time of execution of the new agreement between Collingwood and New Tecumseh. So the first point, if I can just, that has to be moved in a second. So that's why I'm moving that.
Seconder? Councillor McLeod? Why don't we separate those as well? I think just for ease of dealing, and maybe you can talk to number 1.
Thank you. I heard your comments at the beginning of this item's discussion, Mr. Mayor, about how that value came up. And I am just asking in this particular part of the motion that insofar as it was originally set based on appraisal advice, as I understand it, that we even return to that company that gave us that advice to make sure that at this time, which is some years later, that we're still have a current value.
To Director McDonald, do you have comments on that, Brian?
Certainly the original appraisal was based on information that they were provided by the town and utilizing cost of the original pipe, and they applied inflation, but at the same time they applied depreciation. It's a piece of infrastructure. It's not a business, or it's not a building or something like that. So certainly there is depreciation to be considered, as well as inflation on the original cost. So in the end, we can certainly go back and talk to them about it. I'm not anticipating a major change, but we certainly can talk to them if that's the desire.
Okay, any other questions or comments on that? I'll call the vote then. All in favor? Opposed? That's tied, so that's defeated. Number 2.
Number 2, insofar as New Tecumseh hasn't paid in the past, I thought it might be helpful to specify when the payment will be made for this transfer to them of the 18.5% interest, and so I suggest here that payment be made at the time of the execution of the new agreement.
For the seconder. Mr. Comey, CAO or Director McDonald, any comments on that? Has there been discussion about the payment?
There's been no discussion about payment. It just in terms of the comment was made about them not paying in the past. I think the municipality entered into an agreement where its payment would be through the 18%. No water was sold, so nothing materialized from that perspective. But New Tecumseh has certainly paid every one of their bills in the 19 plus years that they've been a customer of ours. So I'm not sure that it's fair to say that they have not paid.
Okay, to the CAO, has there been discussion about when payments will become due under the terms?
Through your worship, no, we haven't discussed when those payments will be made. I think the agreement is contemplating that the amount to be paid will be in the agreement. As to when that amount will be paid hasn't been discussed. My own preference would be for us to leave some flexibility in there for us to negotiate that with the town, rather than being very specific that the amount will be paid upon execution. Clearly the intention is to get that money as part of the agreement, but to give us no flexibility on when that payment is made could put us in a very difficult situation.
And just for clarification, I think when I'd asked Brian where the 6.1 would end up, it was going to go into reserve to help to fund the expansion. Is the timing that some of the aspects of this transaction with payments would be required before the groundbreaking, or what's the thought on that? Director McDonald.
Certainly, it's a very expensive expansion beyond certainly the 6.1 we're talking about. The expansion is 50+ million, and their share is probably in the neighborhood of 40 million. We would develop a payment structure. We certainly can't carry that 40+ million for the 2 or 3 years it's going to take to build it. So, our intention was to build in a payment structure that they would be paying as we move forward with the project.
Okay. Does any of that assist, Councillor Hunt?
Yes, it does. I think it falls into the category that I had said earlier. These terms are quite broad, so they don't address everything, but I really wanted to make sure that the parties turn their mind to exactly, what the payments will be made and when, how much and when. So maybe it's simply that the term sheets specify, the payment schedule by which these payments will be made. Because having heard this discussion here, maybe I'll withdraw that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Number 6.
Thank you. The term sheet contemplates a quote permanent agreement, but with a term. In other words, a number of years. The term sheet to specify the range of matters contemplated to be renegotiated at the end of a term.
Can I get a seconder for that? Councillor McLeod.
I raise this, and I know it sounds a bit esoteric, but it's not clear to me from what we have before us what exactly is the nature of this permanent agreement and what will be coming up for negotiation at the end of the term. Insofar as this is going to be an agreement that will be with us in perpetuity, as I understand the terms of it, I thought it would be helpful for us to have a good understanding of what will be up for renegotiation during this term of in perpetuity. So okay. That was where I'm coming from.
I'll look to the CAO.
Yeah.
Thank you, Worship. I think, again, the intention here is to give both parties the flexibility to bring up anything that needs to be renegotiated. I think to address specifically what items need to be renegotiated is too constricting. I think if the parties want to renegotiate the entire agreement, that prerogative should exist. That should be possible rather than constricting it to 1 or 2 or 3 items in the agreement.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, to CAO Amin. So although the term sheet doesn't discuss that, what you're saying is in fact that the wording would be around a flexibility for the parties throughout history to just decide as they go along what needs to be renegotiated. So otherwise, in other words, if I can just understand this because I just want to get it, whatever agreement we sign with them in the next year or so, it's going to be in place forever, subject to both parties agreeing that something will be renegotiated.
Through your worship, yes. I mean, I think there are 2 elements that I want to be absolutely clear on. One is that the length of this agreement has to be such that it gives us and them the comfort of some predictability and certainty. And the agreement that I've been privy to contains perpetuity clause to say this is agreement will exist forever. I think what we are trying to do here is, in addition to giving them some certainty over a prolonged period of time, also giving us the ability to renegotiate the terms and conditions within that tenure. So, you know, whether we want to discuss 2 or 3 or 4 or the entire agreement, I mean, I think would be subject to that conversation. But within that context, there's got to be some certainty, because this is about water supply. So you can't have the agreement so constricted in terms of years that the party don't have the certainty that you're looking for. So the agreement that we have looked at contains that perpetuity clause, but also has provisions in there that allows the parties to renegotiate provisions in the agreement.
And so that comes down to it. My question is through you, Mr. Mayor. So all terms of the agreement other than the in perpetuity would be up for renegotiation at the end of the term, if the parties so desired?
That would be my my interpretation. The parties can say, yeah, we want to renegotiate the terms and conditions of the agreement within the perpetuity clause.
And again, through you, Mr. Mayor, my question would be, and if any particular matter can't be resolved by negotiation, I understand there's going to be an arbitration clause that there will be binding arbitration on these kind of issues?
That is correct, through your worship.
All right, well, I'm content at this point to withdraw this and to wait to see how the wording comes out in the agreement.
All right, number 7.
Number 7, the term sheet to specify at what point in the context of maximum rated capacity the parties will address a future expansion past the one contemplated by the term sheet. So this, sorry, I'll just stop there.
Seconder? Mr. Bowman.
Thank you. What I'm hoping to make sure is that future councils and staff, when they're, you know, and it could be, you know, 50 years from now, but are thinking around, should we be renegotiating an expansion of this plant between us, that there's some trigger in where they're at in terms of maximum rated capacity that sends them back to the table.
It's, just so I'm clear, you're saying at what point, well, at what point in time what would spark future discussion about yet another increase in capacity like what we're discussing now? Is that the thought?
Yes.
Okay, and I might turn to Director McDonald on that, because my understanding is it's sort of, when you start to hit a certain percentage consistently, then you look at what your needs are.
Certainly, that is correct. In terms of the plant's capacity, when you reach 80% of the plant's capacity, you have to start designing for an expansion. But each municipality would have their own needs, and certainly in terms of Collingwood's needs in terms of capacity, as well as New Tecumseh. Each party may have different needs for capacity, and that in itself would also drive a factor in terms of cost. The plant may not be at capacity, but perhaps New Tecumseh has expanded twice what they had planned, and they need additional capacity, so that would initiate discussions in terms of plant capacity, and the same thing from our perspective.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. My question is, I'm concerned currently that we're putting a hold on all our developments because we don't have water capacity. And what I am trying to, and I know I'm not blaming anybody, but I'm just trying to look ahead in the terms of an agreement that we're going to have in place for a long time, to give some trigger point. And I don't know what the trigger point should be, and I look to staff for that. And maybe it's 70%. When the capacity is at 70%, the parties start talking, or, you know, and if there's nothing to talk about, fine, right? If one party's only using 2% of the capacity and the other one's using it, there's nothing to talk about. But my point here is that we need that trigger point.
Director McDonald?
There are provisions within the current set of terms under number 3 that speaks to some aspects of that in terms of when the plant receives 85% capacity, and we deal with certainly developments that have to be put on hold. We have to have it can't be all on Collingwood's back. It's something that has to be shared by both participating users of the plant. In terms of a trigger for a expansion, the same clause could definitely be utilized in that aspect.
Thank you.
That's it.
Yes, I think if I understand through you, Mr. Mayor, you're, like I did read that clause that you're mentioning, Mr. Director McDonald, and it speaks to adjusting the capacity between the parties. And so, are you content that it will be a good idea to add a clause to actually trigger when expansion discussions should be had along the same lines?
I'm getting a nod from the CAO over here, so is that something that you're going to pursue? We got direction, or is there wording that we would put in here then on this term?
I mean, I think through your worship, consistent with Director McDonald's comment, I mean, I think we can add a sentence in here that speaks to either a new plant or once the plant reaches 85% capacity, that we will begin discussions on the the need for a new facility or a further expansion, I think. So there's a trigger to that, and the trigger is 75 or 80%. I think we could insert a clause in here that provides some certainty to that discussion. I don't have any
Thank you, that would be good.
Okay. All right. No, I don't think we have to vote on that. We're comfortable with the discussion there. Is that the thought?
Well, I would want that to be included, that those words be added.
Okay, I don't know what those words were. So I just want to make sure what we adopt here is what we've got moving forward, and that we're all on the same page.
Well, I think what I've got written here may be in a more general sense what CAO Amin has just described, and I'd be content if what came back was, 75 to 80%.
That one for you?
Yeah, through your worship. Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think what I was thinking about, that we can add a phrase to section 3, purchase commitment, add another sentence at the end of that to simply say that the town of Newton Council and the town of Collingwood will commence discussions on the need for a new water treatment plant once 85% capacity has been reached, or whatever that magic number is.
That would be great.
So you're comfortable with that? So I'll call the vote, knowing that that's the type of wording we're going to use. Director McDonald?
Just in terms of specifying an amount or a percentage, I think again it predetermines an amount, and I think the governance model, one of the anticipated parts of the governance model, would have those discussions when it was appropriate to have the discussions in terms of plant capacity, maintenance requirements, specifying a time frame locks you into something, and I think that we don't know what the future may hold, but it's we can put something in there. I'd be a bit nervous about putting in a specific number. Certainly those are the intentions of what we try to do in terms of start discussing or contemplating plant capacity. It's specified in our approvals as to when we have to start contemplating an expansion. So those are already set within our legislative approvals. So having dates or timeframes that conflict, and if they should change at some point in time by industry. I think the intent was to have a governance and have those discussions in terms of whether it's plant capacity expansion, whether it's maintenance, those kind of things would be talked at the governance, as part of the governance model. That's what was contemplated.
All right, well, what I take from that is that there has to be a discretionary element to the people that are running the plant, the experts in the sector, and that discussion will occur. Is that what you're saying, Director McDonald, through the governance model?
That is correct. There's a lot of, that's just one element of some of the common issues that we may have, and in the governance model, we will have through the new plant, we'll have a whole new set of legislative requirements for the plant, and some of those things we might have to have discussions, and one of them is when the plant gets expanded.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, I think my comment, if I could just make a last thought on this, where this comment came from is from paragraph 3, where it says, at the end there, it's recognized by the parties that when the newly expanded plant reaches 85% of its rated max capacity, daily limits may need to be adjusted by all parties. So this agreement, or the terms, contemplates readjusting the capacity may need to be taken into account when it reaches 85%. I didn't see anything in here that said when the plant reaches, I'll give a number, 85%, we may have to discuss expansion. So I wasn't trying to create anything new or take away discretion or anything. I just saw a bit of a hole here that we have a trigger for when we're going to have to talk about sharing capacity, but we have no trigger for when we might have to talk about expansion. So that's the nature of where my comments come from.
Yeah. Thank you, Your Worship. So I'm going to make a suggestion that we could say that it is recognized by the parties that when a newly expanded plant reaches 85% of its rated maximum capacity, the daily limits or other options may need to be discussed by all parties. So we could add a provision that says other options, which doesn't give us the flexibility to be able to either look at conservation or look at expansion. Does that help, Councillor Hamlin?
Yes, and I wonder if we could say other options such as conservation or expansion. I think conservation is going to be the big part of our future.
Okay, and with that wording, do you require a vote on that, or have we incorporated it sufficiently for you, Councillor Hamlin? With the addition
I
of
do
that?
want those words to be part of a vote.
And the CAO is writing them in now.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So with that being included in the terms of reference, whatever we're calling them now, term sheet, then I think that should address item 7 moving forward, and so we've got through that. Thank you, Councillor Hammond. Next up is, Freeze written it in. Well, I think we're good. Freeze written it right into the terms sheet, and so it's included. Pardon me? Councillor McLeod.
I just want to thank the staff, CAO Admin and Director McDonald, for their hard work on this issue, and also to thank them for their indulgence with a bunch of rookie people who want to do the very, very best by their community and make sure that we get the very best deal that we possibly can.
Kudos all around, I think.
And Councillor Hamlin, of course, as well, for her diligence.
All right, so next item is 10.2, Standing Committee Report from the Strategic Initiative Standing Committee meeting of February 11, 2019.
Mayor Saunderson, before I move with this, may I respectfully suggest we have members of the audience that have been here since 5 o'clock that I hear for 2 specific items, and I'm wondering if we could move those agenda items around to accommodate.
Well, let's just do the standing committee report, because I believe we've gone over this very comprehensively, so I think we can just call the vote on that, and then we'll get to, is it items 11.24, 11.25, and 11.26?
Okay, thank you.
And we'll go to those, absolutely.
Moved by me, seconded by Councillor Comey, be it resolved, the council received the Strategic Initiatives Standing Committee report from its meeting held February the 11th, 2019 as presented. Thank you.
Thank you. So we've had good discussion on that, so I'm just going to call the vote. All in favor? That is carried unanimously, thank you. And who would have those items in 11, 2, 4? Councillor Doherty, please, yeah, go ahead.
I've got a dig here.
Eleven 2.4. That's, I'm going to remove myself, so I'll pass the chair to Deputy Mayor. That's my
comment. Thank you. Who would have that bring forward?
Have that.
Thank you.
Moved by me and seconded by Councillor McLeod. Be it resolved that staff report 2019-10 to be received, and that council enact and pass an authorization bylaw to execute a development agreement for the property addressed as 270 Minnesota Street.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from members of council? Seeing none, then I'll call the vote. All those in favor? It's carried. Thank you. Have the mayor return, that would be appreciated.
No,
oh, my apologies. Thank you. Thank you.
So the bylaw, moved by me and seconded by Councillor Berman, be it resolved that bylaw number 2019-015, being a bylaw to authorize the execution of a development agreement for the development located on land municipally addressed as 270 Minnesota Street, Collingwood, between Lori Newiduk and the Corporation of the Town of Collingwood, be enacted and passed this 11th day of March 2019.
Thank you, Councillor Doherty. Any questions, comments from members of council? Seeing none, I'll ask for the vote. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Now, if we could have the mayor return, I would appreciate it.
All right, the next one we're going to deal with then, Councillor, is 11.2.5. Draft approval of plan subdivision 585 96th Street.
Yes, here it is. So, moved by me and seconded by Councillor McLeod, be it resolved that staff report 2019-11 be received and council grant draft approval to 585 96th Street, plan of subdivision subject to the draft plan drawing and conditions of draft approval attached. And that council provide, and that staff provide council with a list of preconditions and securities prior to tree cutting and installation of a fence and potential of an existing tree buffer be left.
Thank you. Council comments or questions before I call the vote? Councillor Doherty.
I'm wondering if we can just have to think about this for a second, whether it makes any sense. I'm very supportive of the conditions under which the tree cutting permit would be provided. However, I'm not in support generally of the draft approval at this time. So should we separate it out, or?
Well, I think the preconditions are related to the passage of the draft plan, so I'm not sure we can pass one without the other. So the draft, it's a condition of the draft plan approval that these conditions be implemented for the tree cutting.
Okay, I think I know what I need to do then. Thank you.
Councillor Hanlon.
Just so I'm clear, we're talking about the development on 6th Street?
Yes.
Thank you. So I did speak at length about this at the committee, so I won't repeat all my remarks. But I would just like to say I'm not in favor of this proceeding at this time. I have two reasons. One is an impact from the planning point of view and in terms of the long-range planning for our community. This is a block of about, these lands are found within a block which is about 50 or 60 acres in size, located on the south side of 6 between High and Stewart. And that whole block is currently to be developed for medium density. And this proposal is to insert a high-rise unit at the extreme westerly end of this parcel. In reading the traffic report, it is clear we will be seeing shortly thereafter this development, if it was to be approved, another application which would increase the number of high-rise units to a total of 361. 154 of those would be apartment units as opposed to the 64 that are before us today. And I say, as I said before the committee, I'm not opposed to high density buildings, and I'm not opposed necessarily to them here, but I would like to see us deal with these kind of applications that are coming in the context of a large piece of land with some kind of more detail around how the rest of that block is going to work in terms of where will the park be, where will the internal road structure be, where will the stormwater ponds be, and I don't see this before us tonight. And I say, if we are approving this, we are probably going to see applications from every owner along there for high-rise along the frontage of 6. And again, I'm not saying that's a bad idea, but I'm saying I would like to see how that would work and that everything would fit in there. That's my first reason. My second reason is the impact on the future residents of this development. And I had a look in the reports behind the application, and I could see that it's not contemplated that in the apartment units there would be 2 parking spots for each unit. In fact, I think it's something like one every 4 units they've contemplated would have a second parking spot. And not surprisingly, they might say, looking at these kind of developments, that some people would be relying on transit. So I had a look, and I'm speaking now, about where is the transit stop. And the nearest transit stop is about a kilometer away, and there are no sidewalks in that area whatsoever. And so I am foreseeing somebody, and there will be no sidewalks, as far as I can tell, until that whole block develops. So either mothers with carriages and elderly people with their bundle buggies going shopping, they're either going to walk down 6th Street or they're going to cross over to the north side of 6th Street where there is a trail. But I've driven up and down there a number of times over the last few weeks because I've been thinking about this. And that trail would not, in the winter it's been tramped a little bit by some footsteps, but would not be suitable for baby carriages or others who might be trying to maneuver in the winter for a kilometer to get themselves to 5th and High. So in summary, I just don't feel we have enough information before us. I did look at the report, the traffic report again this afternoon to see what they suggested about sidewalks, and because they do have a section on active transportation review. They talk about sidewalks that will be on both sides of 10th line in the future, which of course is quite a bit to the west of this. And then it goes on to say the proposed development will include the construction of an internal sidewalk network, which will connect into the planned sidewalk and trail network on the adjacent streets and provide pedestrian access throughout the town. So in other words, there will be sidewalks in the future within the internal network of this 50 or 60 acre parcel. but I just don't practically see how people are gonna get down to High Street. So for those reasons, I will not be supporting it, thank you.
Thank you. Before I get back to you, Councillor Doherty, I'll see if anyone else would like to comment. Councillor Doherty.
Thank you, Worship, and without elaborating at great length, my reasons for not supporting this particular application are identical to what Councillor Hamlin has outlined in her first objection.
Okay. Seeing no other comments, and I'll call the vote. All in favor? Opposed? That is defeated. Next up, 11.2.6, Councillor Doherty.
Sorry, is that the staff report or the bylaw?
I think it would, it's the,
Staff report. Sorry, I
yes,
apologize.
staff report.
Moved by me and seconded by Councillor Berman, be it resolved the staff report P 2019-12 be received and council adopt the official plan amendment and enact and pass zoning bylaw amendments for 580, 596 Street Plan of Subdivision.
All right, well, we've had ample discussion, so we'll just call the vote. All in favor, sorry, Deputy Mayor?
One question, through you to the Director of Planning, do we anticipate that this will be appealed?
Nancy?
Thank you, through Mayor Saunderson to Deputy Mayor Hull. Yes, I would anticipate.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, point of privilege on this. I don't believe we should be asking our planning director legal questions. And if there are legal questions to be asked, we should be seeking the advice of our council.
I think it's a fair question. He's asking our planning director if he anticipates that this could be subject to an appeal, and Director Farrar is answering the question, so I'm not going to allow the objection. Go ahead, Nancy.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. It would be my view that in discussions with the applicant, I would anticipate that they would be appealing.
Thank you. So with that, we'll get back then to the bylaw, or the staff report. We're starting with the staff report and then we'll do the bylaw. So first calling the vote then on the staff report. Plan of subdivision 580, 596 Street, all in favor? All opposed? That is defeated. And then the bylaw. Do you have?
Moved by me, seconded by Councillor Comey. Be it resolved that bylaw number 2019-016 be a bylaw to adopt amendment number 41 to the official plan of the town of Collingwood to amend the residential density designation on part of 580, 596 Street Plan of Subdivision lands be enacted and passed this 11th day of March 2019.
So I'll call the vote. All in favor? Opposed? That is defeated. What's the next item, Councillor Doherty?
Shall we go back to the original sequence?
Yes, please. Let's go back then to 11.2.1.
So that would be the heritage.
Oh, sorry. We'll go back to 11.1, yeah, the minutes and reports of other committees.
Yes, okay, thank you. Moved by me and seconded by Deputy Mayor Hull. Be it resolved that council receive the Collingwood Heritage Committee minutes of November 21st, 2018 and January 23rd, 2019, and the following recommendation be included in the 2019 budget deliberations. And the recommendation that the Collingwood Heritage Committee is aware of current staff restrictions and time constraints and recommends that a full-time equivalent dedicated staff resource be hired or contracted. That's from the November 21st minutes.
Okay. Council, any comments or questions on the minutes? Just a procedural question, and then are we accepting this recommendation, or what's the implication of the request?
Certainly through your worship to members of council. Basically what I will do, if council approves a motion as presented this evening, we'll add that to the parking lot items that will be considered on Thursday. So if council wants to proceed with it, they can put forward a motion, otherwise, no further action on it. That would be the end.
So by passing the recommendation, it kicks it into the budget process and can be determined at that point?
Correct.
Okay, good. Any questions or comments, council? We'll call the vote then. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. Councilor Doherty.
Next item, the annual water compliance report, moved by me and seconded by Deputy Mayor Hull. Be it resolved, the staff report PW 2019-05 be received and council approve the 2018 annual water compliance report, which was a very positive report indeed.
Yes, more than positive, it was 100%. Where I come from, you can't get any better than that. So Peggy, congratulations to you and your department. I don't know that anyone has questions for Peggy. Councillor Comey.
Just a very quick question, Your Worship. I was just wondering if the water quality report is up on the website now.
Peggy?
Yes, through the mayor to Councillor Comey, the report is on the website and was posted there following the last meeting, our last meetings, to make sure that we had it up on time. Thank you so much.
Any other questions or comments, council? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. Councillor Doherty.
Moved by me and seconded by Councillor Madigan. Be it resolved that staff report PW 2019-06 be received and council approve the addition of stop signs for the purpose of providing all-way stop control at the intersection of 2nd Street and Cedar Street. And further, that a bylaw be prepared for approval to enact stop sign control condition and always stop control condition as recommended, and staff be directed to erect the appropriate signage. And that council requests staff undergo a further count for the intersection of Cedar and 3rd Street at peak time and report back to council.
Council, any questions? Councillor Comey?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Director McDonald, then, just to clarify that peak time, I think there was some discussion at committee about it being during the school year. There was some parental concern. So can we kindly give a clarification what we mean by peak time?
Councillor McDonald, or Director McDonald?
Through the mayor to Councillor Comey, it's my understanding that the residents would like it to be during a school time frame. I think that just some information from previous is that we have done 2 during school time and 1 during summer. Summer was felt that summer would be peak time from a traffic perspective, but certainly peak time from a student or potential users walking to school would be during a school time frame.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Councillor Doherty.
Yes, thank you, and also through you to the Director of Engineering. We have, one of the items that we're entertaining in this year's budget is a traffic, like a town-wide traffic study. That's correct?
That is correct. It actually was from previous year's study, and it's anticipated, previous year's budget, and it's anticipated that study will be completed in the spring of this year.
And that would incorporate the dynamics of all roadways throughout the municipality.
Certainly that's not the intent of the traffic study. The traffic study, you would look at major intersections and major corridors. It's a review of previous traffic studies. It doesn't look at every road in the municipality. I think if that was the question. It does not look at that. It looks at major intersections and growth areas and collector arterial roads where those growth areas are potentially impacted in the next 10 years.
Thank you. So through you, so Third Street being a collector, would it then be included in the study?
Certainly intersections along Third Street, such as Third and High, where a traffic signal has been contemplated, that has been studied in the past and will be reviewed as part of this study.
So, but not the rest of the roadway.
Certainly, that's not the intent of the transportation study, to look at each individual roadways.
So if because there, obviously at budget meetings on Thursday, there was a number of residents who came and spoke about their concern generally for the dynamics of traffic along the entire roadway. What mechanism do we have to consider that and to look for potential solutions if there are legitimate problems? That'd be the official plan review?
Through the mayor to Councillor Doherty, I'm not sure I fully understand the question.
So we had a number of residents who spoke about their concerns about traffic along Third Street, not just at this Cedar Street intersection, but generally speaking along the entire length of the roadway from High Street through until here Ontario Street. And my question is, how can we objectively look at the performance of that roadway as a collector today, the volume of traffic, the dynamics, to evaluate whether there indeed is a serious problem or any problem at all, and if so, what measures could be could be recommended coming out of such an investigation. Sorry, it's a very long-winded way of saying it, but.
Through the mayor to Councillor Doherty, certainly the ask in terms of evaluating the intersection for stop control during peak times is one aspect of it. We have it identified as collector road in our official plan, as well as in our future capital programs, in terms of looking at deficiencies in terms of sidewalk, road construction, road widths. In terms of studying that's a totally different ask. It's beyond a transportation study. You're looking at doing an evaluation of that road, which is very specific to that road, and that's not the intent of a transportation study. The transportation study looks at significant intersections, makes recommendations with respect to traffic improvements at those particular intersections. It would be a very specific ask to look at the that particular road in itself.
I would like to make that ask in some manner. I don't know whether I need to request a staff report or bring back a request.
Back under other business.
Okay, thank you.
So for now, we are we're dealing with the item staff report 2019-6. Okay, and this is the additional stop sign for Second and Cedar, and the additional traffic study for Cedar and Third. A good discussion.
I'm in support.
Okay. So I'm now going to call the motion. All in favor? That is carried unanimously.
Thank you.
And there's a bylaw for that too.
Yes, moved by me and seconded by Councillor Madigan. Be it resolved that bylaw number 2019-014, being a bylaw to authorize the installation of an all-way stop at the intersection of 2nd and Cedar Streets, be enacted and passed this 11th day of March 2019.
Thank you. I will call the vote then. All in favor? That is passed unanimously. Then actually, Councillor Doherty, I think under 11.2.6, we missed the bylaw.
Yes,
So that
I'm
was
just
staff report was
looking
defeated, so if we can bring the bylaw
I
forward.
apologize, I'm just looking at it right now. Moved by me and seconded by Deputy Mayor Hull, be it resolved that bylaw number 2019-17 being a bylaw under the provisions of section 24, 2 and 34 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990, CP 13 as amended to rezone property located 585 96th Street from the deferred residential zone to holding 12 residential 4th density H12R zone to the holding 12 residential 3rd density exception R3-E zone to the recreation REC zone and the public roadway PR zone be enacted and passed this 11th day of March 2019.
I will call the vote then. All in favor? All opposed? And that's defeated.
Thank you.
That drops us down then to, are we at building permits now? 11.2.7?
Yes.
Okay.
Moved by me and seconded by, you should be a doctor. Seconded by Councillor Comey, be it resolved that staff report 2019-08 be received and council direct the town clerk to provide notice of a public meeting in accordance with subsection 7-6 of the Building Code Act to receive input on the proposed changes to the permit fees and adjustments recommended in this report.
Good, thank you. Council, any questions or comments? Councillor Hamlin.
Just a quick comment, Mr. Mayor. I wanted just to point out that in this report there is 2 items that were brought forward to address the impact of infill development. And I really just wanted the public to know that there will be a requirement that if additions greater than 400 square feet are proposed, that if we adopt this, that the applicant would be required to submit a grading plan and grading securities in the amount of $3,000. And similarly, a top of foundation wall certificate will be required to make sure the elevation of the foundation fits with those permit drawings, because often people just sneak a little height in there. So anyway, all good news for those who are worried about infill. Thank you.
Good. I'll call the vote then. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. Standing committee report.
Moved by me and seconded by Deputy Mayor Hull, be it resolved that council receive the Development and Operations Services Standing Committee report from its meeting held February 20th, 2019 as presented. I believe we've touched on all of those topics
Had a good discussion.
in detail.
So I will call the vote then. All in favor? Passed unanimously. Now we are into reports and minutes of other committees and boards, 12.11, etc. Who would have that?
That is me.
Councillor Maddox.
Mayor Saunderson. So excited to get to this point. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Berman. Be it resolved that council receive the following committee and board minutes. Accessibility Advisory Committee minutes, November 22nd, 2018. Collingwood Downtown BIA Board of Management minutes, October 11th, November 8th, and December 13th of 2018 and January 22nd of 2019. The Museum Advisory Committee minutes, October 18th and November 23rd of 2018. And the Trails Advisory Committee minutes, October 11th, November 8th, December 13th, all of 2018, and January 10th, 2019.
Council, any questions or comments before I call the vote on these minutes? Seeing none, all in favor? That is carried unanimously. We don't need to deal with 12.2.1, so we'll get down to point 2 then. PRC 2019-1 Gathering Circle Budget Update. Who would have that?
I have it all.
Councilor Madigan.
Thank you. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Berman. Be it resolved that staff report PRC 2019-01 being an update to the Gathering Circle budget be received for information.
Thank you. Council, any questions or comments? I'll call the vote then. All in favor? It's carried unanimously. Councilor Madigan.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Berman. Be it resolved that staff report PRC 2019-02 titled Parks, Recreation and Culture Master Plan be received and council support future approvals for implementation as presented during budget deliberations or as requested through future staff reports.
Council, any questions or comments? Being none, I'll call the vote then. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. And staff, or committee report, standing committee report. Councilor Madigan.
Yeah, we're just gonna do the Georgian Trails.
Oh, that one too. Good, we should do that.
Yeah, I think so. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Berman. Be it resolved that staff report PRC 2019-03 titled Georgian Trail Annual Operations Report be received for information.
I have George Christie hunting me down. All right, council, any questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. Now we get to the committee report.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Berman. Be it resolved that council received the Corporate and Community Services Standing Committee report from its meeting held March 4th, 2019 as presented.
Good. We've covered pretty much everything that went on at that meeting. So I'll just call the vote then. All in favor? It's carried unanimously. That gets us into staff reports 13.1, 2019-01 asset sale proceeds. Who would have that? Councillor Berman.
Thank you. Moved by me, seconded by Councillor McLeod. Be it resolved that staff report T 2019-01 be received and council direct staff to begin the public consultation process with respect to the asset sale proceeds.
And other than we now know those numbers are bumping up, are there any questions for the treasurer? I'll call the vote then. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. So we don't have any motions today, no bylaws, any notices of motion, council? County report, I'll look to you, Deputy Mayor. I don't know if you want to, we've got our upcoming governance review workshop, so it might be interesting to do it next time.
I think I will defer to the next meeting if possible.
Okay. So
on that note,
yes,
sorry, I apologize. Next Tuesday morning, as you mentioned, we do have a governance workshop. It's specific to what has been proposed to, or what the province is engaging. If anybody from this table has any comments that you wish to convey, please do.
yes, it will be an interesting day. Council business, any old or deferred business, council? Or other business, Councillor Doherty.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. So following up on a number of discussions and comments from members of the public and specifically residents of 3rd Street, I'm reaching out to staff to inquire in what way can we examine the functionality of that road as a collector, identify safety concerns, if any, and ameliorative steps, and in particular, traffic calming measures for that roadway. What would be the mechanism for that?
Director McDonald.
Through your worship to Councillor Doherty, I just to clarify the question is if we were questioning the status of it being a collector road, then that's definitely an official plan issue. So that's something beyond what we would be looking at. If we're looking at just the status of the road as a collector road, what needs to be improved, what are deficient, we can certainly do that in the context of our staff report and include it as part of our staff report for the intersection. So we can look at the intersection and provide comment on the warrants for a signalized intersection, but at the same time we can look at our traffic counts. We can look at the number of pedestrians that cross the street, whether they're school age, whether maybe this is an appropriate location for a crossing guard in the interim, given that there are lacking sidewalks on some side of the road. We can report to council what is deficient in terms of sidewalk, what is deficient in terms of the road construction from a collector perspective, and give our planned intentions from an overall capital perspective. That certainly can be part of we can roll that into our report. If we're looking at traffic calming, as we discussed at our previous meeting, we really don't have a policy with respect to traffic calming. The limits of our traffic calming at this stage is we've got those your speed, portable your speed signs, and we roll them around different parts of town to provide some level of information to the traveling public in terms of their speed. But if we're looking at traffic calming, we don't have a policy, and dealing with traffic calming on one street, you really want to look at it holistically in the town and what's the cost implications and what types of traffic calming do you want to implement, at what do you deal it at. Just anybody, makes a request, you can have to deal with traffic calming. We'd have to set a budget for traffic calming, so it's something well beyond just something we can look at in the context of just this particular street. That would be my recommendation.
So it seems as though we have sort of a short-term solution or inquiry, and then something that's going to take a little bit longer. But it seems to me that we are becoming increasingly focused on active transportation in this community, and if we don't have formal traffic calming policies, then I believe, in my opinion, we should. And so I guess what I would like to ask then, and maybe the clerk can help me out, but yes, I would certainly take Director McDonald up on his offer to do a more exhaustive study of the traffic and pedestrian activity on 3rd Street, but further that I would request a staff report on the manner in which we can pursue formal traffic calming policies for the town.
And I think that's an excellent suggestion. Just from what I heard from Director McDonald, this is a larger undertaking,
that's why I'm
and
saying
there's cost implications.
yeah.
So I think what the clerk's recommended is that maybe you work together with the clerk and staff and come forward next meeting with a notice of motion.
Okay, I will do that. Thank you.
Okay. Any other business? Seeing none, we have no in camera. Who has a confirmatory bylaw tonight? Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you. This would be moved by me, seconded by Councillor Berman. Be it resolved that bylaw number 2019-020, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the special meetings of council held February 13 and 28, 2019, and the regular meeting of council held March 11, 2019.
All right. We'll call the vote. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. Councillor Jeffrey is not here, so who wants to move adjournment? Councillor Doherty. All in favor? We are adjourned, folks. Thank you very much. Yes. No.
Morty wants to go out, his was for next week. Yes. Catherine and I'll